Chapter 113. Rumble. Mount Qinglan shook violently again, as if a landslide was about to happen. Then, three figures quickly left the main hall of the Qingfeng sword sect and went along the rugged mountain road to the depths of Mount Qinglan. Once again, they came to a small valley. Elder Luo, we meet again. The three elders of the Qingshui sword sect also quickly arrived. The leading elder immediately saluted the three elders of the Qingfeng sword sect and laughed. Elder Yao. Elder Luo also returned the greeting with a smile. Haha, this time, I wonder how the disciples of our two sects are doing? Elder Yao had a smile on his face, and there was a trace of anticipation in his eyes. It should be good. I think it might be better than before. Elder Luo also had a smile on his face and said. The first thing that flashed in his mind was the figure of Chu Mu, followed by the figure of Shao Qianfeng. It could be said that every time the elite disciples entered the void realm of Qinglan in the past, the highest level of strength was the strength of Li Yi, Yuanhua, and Wang Tingo. However, this time, Chu Mu and Shao Qianfeng were completely extra. Their strength was beyond their previous level. Although it was said that sometimes one had to rely on luck in Qinglan's void realm, powerful strength was an indispensable strong backing. Oh, it seems that Elder Luo is very confident. Elder Yao was slightly stunned at first, but then, he laughed a little, but he was a little disapproving. It was the same every time, and there was not much difference. He did not know that among the elite disciples of the Qingfeng sword sect this time, Chu Mu and Shao Qianfeng were among them. Elder Luo also smiled and said nothing, but he was indeed full of confidence. The total harvest of the elite disciples of the Qingfeng sword sect this time was obviously better than before. What a joke! What harvest are you expecting? Maybe not even a disciple can leave alive. The three elders of the Qinglan sword sect who had just arrived heard this. One of them, Elder Yao Ri, sneered sarcastically while the other two elders also sneered sarcastically. Elder Yao and the others were instantly enraged. Their auras surged forward fiercely. What? Do you want to have a taste of our prowess? Elder Yao Ri sneered. He looked like he was going to teach the other party a lesson. Elder Yao, don't be anxious. However, Elder Luo was not angry. Instead, he smiled and said, when our disciples come out, look at their faces. You will know how refreshing it is. The reason why Elder Luo was so calm was completely due to his confidence in Chu Mu and Shao Qianfeng. The two of them were extremely powerful, completely comparable to a 10th phase swordsman. With such a cultivation base and superb swordsmanship, he would definitely gain a lot in the emptiness realm. As long as Chu Mu and Shao Qianfeng gained a lot, it was equivalent to slapping the faces of the three elders of the Qinglan sword sect. When the time came, their expressions would definitely be very interesting. Elder Yao's expression was a little uncertain. He originally thought that Elder Luo was just saying, but now it seemed that he was very confident. He could not help but guess, and the anger in his heart slowly dissipated. However, the three elders of the Qinglan sword sect looked at each other. There was a smug smile in each other's eyes. Their faces were full of ridicule for the elders of the Qingfeng sword sect and the Qingshui sword sect. This was because they were very clear about the fact that the emptiness realm of Qinglan was not big. When it was opened for a month, it was enough to travel through the entire emptiness realm. Therefore, under the pursuit of a 10th phase swordsman, it was absolutely impossible to survive. The three of them had already imagined the expressions on the faces of the elders of the two major sword sects when their elite disciples of the Qinglan sword sect appeared with a lot of spiritual medicine and so on, but no disciples of the Qingfeng sword sect and the Qingshui sword sect showed up. Next, the elders all stared at the entrance of the emptiness realm of Qinglan. The news had spread, and it was believed that it would not be long before the disciples of the three major sword sects left the emptiness realm of Qinglan. Everyone, hurry up! The emptiness realm of Qinglan is about to close. Yuanhua shouted, and one by one, they sped up their footsteps and quickly flew to the entrance of the emptiness realm of Qinglan. All the elite disciples of the Qingfeng sword sect and the Qingshui sword sect were there. There were a total of 8 people, and each of their cultivation base was at the peak of the 9th phase. Although Xie Chunlei's left arm was broken and he lost a lot of blood, with the help of a red blood fruit given by Chu Mu, and after a few days of recuperation and some encounters in the emptiness realm of Qinglan, not only was his injury much better, but even his sword cultivation base had also made a breakthrough. Because there was no trouble from the elite disciples of the Qinglan sword sect, coupled with the fact that the strength of the group of 8 was very strong, there were very few fierce beasts like the dead-wood horned python in the emptiness realm of Qinglan. Therefore, the 8 of them almost swept through most of the emptiness realm of Qinglan, searching most of the corners and plundering a lot of good things. Naturally, the spiritual medicine and other good things were also distributed according to the proportion. There were only 2 people left in the Qingshui sword sect, so they could only get a quarter of the total. In fact, they were very satisfied with a quarter. After all, they did not contribute much and their overall strength was not as good as Chu Mu and the others. Even if Chu Mu and the others did not share it with them, they could not do anything. Under the flying speed, the earth seemed to be receding rapidly. After a while, the 8 of them once again came to the entrance of the emptiness realm of Qinglan. Looking at the whirlpool-like entrance, the 8 of them stopped and looked at each other. Yuan Wenhua took the lead and flashed into the whirlpool and disappeared. "Everyone, see you outside." Li Yi smiled and also plunged into the whirlpool. He's out, he's out." The whirlpool suddenly sped up and a shadow flashed out. The eyes of the 9 elders of the 3 major sword sects suddenly lit up and they stared at it, full of expectations. In a flash, a figure rushed out and landed steadily. The joy and excitement on the faces of the 3 elders of the Qinglan sword sect suddenly froze, a touch of confusion spread in their eyes. The 3 elders of the Qingfeng sword sect, on the other hand, had a smile on their faces. The 3 elders of the Qingshui sword sect also had a bit of expectation. Then Li Yi appeared, which made the 3 elders of the Qinglan sword sect even more stunned and even more puzzled. However, they suppressed the doubts in their hearts, secretly thinking that maybe there were only 2 or 3 fish that escaped the net. Then, another person appeared. It was Wang Tingo. Elder Luo and the others were even more happy. The 4th person was Yao Bifeng, which made the 3 elders of the Qingshui sword sect happy. The elite disciples who appeared quickly moved their feet and went to the elders of the various sections. Good, good, good. Elder Luo and the others looked at the elite disciples and found that the breath they exuded was purer and more powerful than before they entered the emptiness realm of Qinglan. They also saw that the bags on their backs were bulging, which made them very happy and excited. "Where are Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng? Did you meet them?" "Elder, don't worry, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng will be out soon." Li Yi smiled and thought of what they had discussed before coming out, about the conspiracy of the Qinglan sword sect, but he did not say it immediately. After all, he did not have the ability to use the sword aura to transmit sound. Once he said it, it was very likely that it would reach the ears of the 3 elders of the Qinglan sword sect. At that time, there might be unexpected changes. It was better to wait until he returned to the sword sect to report this matter, and let the higher-ups of the sword sect deal with it. The disciples appeared one by one. Chu Mu was the last. When the 3 elders of the Qinglan sword sect saw Chu Mu come out, the astonishment and doubt on their faces could no longer be hidden. "Xiao Qianfeng, Chu Mu, great, you are all out." Elder Luo and the other 2 elders were very excited and showed a caring look. Especially when they saw that Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng's cultivation had reached the peak of stage 9, they were even more excited. What's going on? Why did so many of the elite disciples of the Azure Edge sword sect come out alive? And why are they all the true elites? Elder Luminous Sun asked with a gloomy face through sword chi. What the hell is Wei Hong doing? Elder Greenwood's face was also gloomy. When they come out, I must ask them properly. I must ask them clearly what is going on. They can't even do something right. The third elder also looked constipated and said with a sword aura, "This kind of thing, they naturally did not dare to let the Qinfeng sword sect and the Qingshui sword sect know about it. Once they knew, the two sects would join forces and Qinfeng sword sect would not be able to handle it. They waited and waited, but no one else came out. The whirlpool-like entrance of the Qinglan void realm shrank little by little and finally disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Suddenly, the 9 elders all showed a look of astonishment and confusion. What was going on? It was completely different from what they had imagined. Could it be that the other disciples who did not come out all died in the Qinglan void realm? Feng what is going on? Why did only the 2 of you come out of our sect? Elder Yao frowned and asked with a heavy face. Grandpa. Yao Bifeng looked at Elder Yao and hesitated for a moment. She was about to say something when she changed the topic. The 20 elite disciples of our sect, except for the 2 of us, all are dead. Dead. Elder Yao and the other 2 elders trembled and took a step back. Their faces were full of horror and disbelief. Elder Yao's eyes shone brightly and his hands pressed on Yao Bifeng's shoulders. His voice was very emotional. Why did they die? How did they die? Yao Bifeng looked at the 3 elders of the Qinglan sword sect and then looked at Elder Yao. She said, Grandpa, I will tell you the details when we return to the sect. Chu Mu, what is going on? Why did only the 6 of you come out alive? Elder Luo's face was full of confusion and excitement. This was completely different from usual. Before Chu Mu could answer, the eyes of the 3 elders of the Qinglan sword sect had already swept over like lightning. Suddenly, Elder Yao Ri's eyes focused on the sword on Chu Mu's back. He stared at it and the light became more and more fierce. Suddenly, he flashed and turned into a flash of lightning and rushed toward Chu Mu. He reached out and the sword qi spread into a claw. Elder Luminous Sun's cultivation level was not low and his speed was extremely fast. Coupled with his sudden attack, even the 2 elders beside him could not react in time, let alone the others. However, Chu Mu was very alert. When Elder Yao Ri stared at him and his eyes became more and more fierce, a sense of crisis emerged from the bottom of his heart. When Elder Yao Ri flew over, almost instinctively, 30% of the wind concept was completely integrated into the windwalk movement. He quickly retreated and swayed like a willow branch. However, Elder Yao Ri's sword qi cultivation was many times better than Chu Mu's. Under the grasp, Chu Mu only felt that the surrounding space was shrouded. Even the airflow was fixed in one place and could not dissipate. He only felt that his eyes were dark and even the sky was covered. It was like a mountain was crushing down, making him feel helpless. He felt powerless from the bottom of his heart, like a bird in a cage. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 114. Elder Yao Ri was extremely fast and his sword qi cultivation was extremely high. He reached out his hand and grabbed. The sword qi was extremely hot and the surrounding air was ignited. Chu Mu, who was trapped, could only feel the air around him burning and pressuring him. His mouth was dry and he was sweating profusely. It was as if he would be turned into ashes in an instant. Half-step sword force. With a roar in his heart, his essence, qi, and spirit merged and condensed into a sword. It was extremely sharp and unstoppable. It was unyielding and unstoppable. In an instant, Chu Mu unleashed all his strength. A terrifying light shot out from his eyes and pierced through the void. The fake clear breeze sword was unsheathed and fused with the half-step sword force. This sword was completely different from the simplified version of the image of wind. However, in terms of power, it was not inferior to the simplified version of the image of wind. In an instant, Chu Mu's body seemed to have fused with the fake clear breeze sword in his hand. There was a feeling of cutting through heaven and earth and the void. When he swung it, the sharpness was unstoppable. Elder Yao Ri's grab was immediately torn apart. Chu Mu seized the opportunity and used the Windwalker movement technique with all his might. He turned into a gust of wind and immediately rushed out of the small tear. Yao Ri, you're courting death. With a loud shout, Elder Luo's black hair danced wildly. Every strand of his hair was like a sword that pierced the sky. He grabbed with his hand and pulled out the sword on his back. The clanging noises sounded like the clashing of divine metals from outer space. A dazzling beam of sword light flashed across the sky like a rainbow. Mixed with an incomparably fierce innate sword energy, the sword struck towards Elder Yao Ri, stirring up a storm and shaking the heaven and earth. This sword was formed from Elder Luo's anger. It was extremely powerful and carried with it a killing intent. Elder Yao Ri's expression changed drastically. He pulled out the brilliant sun sword from his back. Raging flames burned as he slashed the sword in the air. It was extremely domineering, as if it had turned into a red sun that shook the void and burned everything. When the two swords collided, an earth-shattering explosion occurred. The terrifying sword chi exploded from the middle, forming a circular ring that instantly spread out. It was as if a layer of skin had been torn apart, and a loud rumbling sound could be heard. Under the devastating impact of the sword chi, countless cracks appeared on the ground. It was as if an earth dragon had turned over and charged into the distance. The surrounding rocks were instantly reduced to dust by the sword chi. The bodies of Shao Qianfeng and the others trembled, and their faces were filled with shock. Faced with this kind of extremely terrifying sword chi's aftershock, and its extremely fast speed, they were simply unable to dodge. Once they were hit by the aftershock, they would undoubtedly die. In the blink of an eye, the other two elders immediately took action. Innate sword chi burst out and formed two walls of sword chi, blocking the aftershock of the sword chi and preventing Shao Qianfeng and the others from being affected. Chu Mu landed on the ground. His face was pale, and his eyes were filled with exhaustion. He felt powerless all over his body, but in his heart, he was incomparably furious. His breathing was hurried, and his chest heaved up and down rapidly. It was as if the magma of a volcano was constantly accumulating and was about to erupt. Staring at the retreating Elder Yao Ri, Chu Mu's eyes were filled with undisguised rage and killing intent. Just now, if he hadn't burst out in a moment of desperation and fused the half-step sword force with the sword in his hand, completely combining his essence, chi, and spirit to unleash a sword attack that was absolutely impossible to do under normal circumstances, and break through Yao Ri's sudden attack, even if he didn't die, he would definitely be seriously injured. And a chi transformation realm expert, an elder of the sword sect, had actually suddenly attacked him, a disciple of the 9th stage of the sword chi realm. If he didn't have some trump cards, he would probably end up in a very bad situation. How could Chu Mu not feel angry? Yao Ri, you're truly shameless to the extreme. You actually dared to attack a disciple of the sword sect. Are you trying to start a war between the two sects? Elder Luo pointed his sword at Yao Ri. Intense innate sword chi converged on the sword, and it was extremely cold. It cut through the surroundings with a sharp whistling sound. His eyes were filled with rage, and his aura condensed to the extreme. It was so sharp that it shook the void as he roared in anger. Humph! Elder Yao Ri's face was extremely gloomy and very ugly. He snorted coldly and quickly stepped back into the camp of the elders of the Qinglan sword sect. His eyes slid from Elder Luo's face to Chu Mu's face, and his voice was low with suppressed murderous intent. Chu Mu, let me ask you, where did the sword on your back come from? Hearing Yao Ri's words, the other two elders of the Qinglan sword sect who were secretly puzzled looked over together. At first, they were stunned, and then, their eyes flashed violently, and a strong fierce aura surged from their bodies. Tell me, where did the sword on your back come from? Elder Qing Mu's face also became very ugly, and he questioned sternly. They recognized at a glance that the sword was quite familiar. Wasn't it the pseudo-fire python sword used by Wei Hong? Why was Wei Hong's sword on Chu Mu's back? Did this mean that Wei Hong had died in the void realm of Qinglan, and the sword was obtained by Chu Mu? Under all kinds of guesses, the three elders of the Qinglan sword sect looked very ugly. Chu Mu, tell me, where are all the disciples of our sect? The third elder took a step forward, and his aura was very shocking. He burst out and asked fiercely, and one hand even grabbed the hilt of the sword. It seemed that if he did not answer, he would immediately disregard his identity and attack. Where are the disciples of the Qinglan sword sect? Who am I supposed to ask if you ask me? Chu Mu smiled coldly and said he would not tell the truth, and that would undoubtedly cause unnecessary trouble for himself. I found this sword in a ferocious beast's nest. A ferocious beast's nest? The three elders of the Qinglan sword sect frowned together. Is Wei Hong really dead? Or was he killed by a ferocious beast? This is impossible. With Wei Hong's cultivation at the peak of 10th stage and the pseudo-fire python sword, he could even contend with an ordinary half-step to the Qi stage. They did not associate Wei Hong's death with Chu Mu at all, because the cultivation gap between them was too big. Moreover, Wei Hong returned from the Liz Ho Sword Academy, which was more competitive, so his combat power was unquestionable. What ferocious beast! Elder Yao Ri's eyes flashed, making Chu Mu feel even more pressured. How would I know? Chu Mu looked directly at Elder Yao Ri and stared at his oppressive pressure, and said coldly, the anger in his heart dissipating little by little. Because at this time, he was still not a match for Elder Yao Ri, so there was no benefit in being angry. He could only remember this as a kind of motivation, and wait until he was strong enough to settle the score with Elder Yao Ri. Didn't you find the corpse of the ferocious beast? Elder Yao Ri's hair stood on end, and a blazing aura surged from his body. His whole body even emitted traces of red light, like a scorching sun. The surrounding air was ignited, and countless amounts of water evaporated like smoke. This terrifying aura suddenly rushed towards Chu Mu, as if it wanted to turn Chu Mu into ashes. Elder Luo shouted angrily, and his aura condensed, directly crushing Elder Yao Ri's powerful aura. Yao Ri, you are really shameless. Come, let me teach you a lesson, Elder Luo shouted. Elder Luo, if you want to fight, I will accompany you. But before that, your disciple must explain the matter clearly and hand over the sword. Elder Qing Mu took a step forward, and his aura was imposing. The sword on his back slowly pulsed, and the wind and clouds surged. No matter which sword sect it was, a pseudo-sword was extremely valuable, especially for a lower-grade sword sect. It was a treasure that could not be lost. Yes, immediately hand over the sword and explain the matter clearly. Otherwise, don't blame me for not being polite. The third elder of Qinglan sword sect's aura also skyrocketed and shouted. The eyes of the three elders of Qinglan sword sect were fierce and tyrannical, and fell on Chu Mu's body. Suddenly, it was as if the attack was real, and the pressure on Chu Mu skyrocketed. He could not help but groan, and his face changed as he took 2 steps back. Elder Luo flashed and stood in front of Chu Mu. The other 2 elders also flashed and stood in a line, blocking the powerful aura of the 3 elders of Qinglan sword sect. Grandpa, help Chu Mu. Yao Bifeng was anxious, and quickly grabbed the corner of Elder Yao's clothes and pleaded. Oh, why is that? Elder Yao was stunned. When he saw Yao Bifeng's anxious face, he suddenly showed a smile and said, Feng do you like this kid? No, I don't. Yao Bifeng did not expect Elder Yao to say such words. She suddenly blushed and hurriedly explained, when I was in the virtual realm, I was almost killed. It was him who saved me. What? Who wanted to kill you? Elder Yao's face changed and suddenly became angry. His son and daughter-in-law were dead, and only Yao Bifeng was left. He loved her very much. When he heard that she was almost killed, He was angry from the bottom of his heart. Grandpa, quickly do it. As for the other things, I will explain in detail when we return to Qinglan Sword Sect. Yao Bifeng said anxiously. Well, since Feng saved your life, then I can't sit back and do nothing. Elder Yao nodded. In a flash, he appeared next to Elder Luo and the others, facing the 3 elders of Qinglan Sword Sect. Elder Luo was stunned. Although Qingfeng Sword Sect and Qingshui Sword Sect had a good relationship, they were actually competitors. Why was Elder Yao so determined to stand on their side? Elder Yao, what do you mean by this? Do you want to be enemies with us? Elder Qing Mu's face changed greatly and asked in a deep voice. As fellow Qi Transformation Realm swordsmen and elders of a sect, you actually dare to disregard your status and face to attack a Sword Qi Realm disciple? Even I, as an elder, can't bear to watch any longer. As an elder, I feel ashamed for you. Elder Yao said slowly and without fear. What's more, I like this disciple very much and decided to help him. Why? You 3 won't be enemies with me because of this, right? You are so narrow-minded. I really don't know how you cultivate. Everyone could not help but laugh, but the 3 elders of the Qinglan Sword Sect almost vomited blood. So, Elder Yao, you have made up your mind to be enemies with our sect? Elder Qing Mu's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. You're being too serious. You're using the name of the Sword Sect as an enemy. Are you trying to completely put Qinglan Sword Sect on the opposite side of Qingfeng Sword Sect and Qingshui Sword Sect? Elder Yao smiled faintly and said unhurriedly. Elder Qing Mu was almost constipated. Good, good, good. The 3 words in a row showed the anger in Elder Qing Mu's heart, but he was also very wary. If it were only the 3 elders of Qingfeng Sword Sect, he would not be afraid at all because the 3 of them would definitely be able to suppress the other party. However, with the addition of Elder Yao, who was only slightly weaker than him, the situation would be reversed once he made a move. By then, not only would he not be able to achieve his goal, but he would also be humiliated. The loss outweighed the gain. Let me say this. None of our disciples came out. They must have met with some mishap, and this has the most to do with Qingfeng Sword Sect. When I return to Qingfeng Sword Sect, I will report this matter. When the time comes, our sect leader will naturally come to Qingfeng Sword Sect personally to ask for an explanation. We will wait for your arrival. Elder Luo snorted coldly and said, Chu Mu, you better stay in Qingfeng Sword Sect obediently. Don't even take half a step out. Otherwise, no one can guarantee that you will live well. Elder Yao Ri sheathed his sword and stared at Chu Mu. He suddenly spoke, causing everyone to crease their brows. An elder, a Qi Transformation Realm expert, was actually threatening a disciple of Sword Qi Realm in such an obvious way. This showed how shameless this elder was. Don't worry, I will live well. In 10 years, I will challenge Qingfeng Sword Sect with my sword. I hope you will still be alive by then. Chu Mu smiled coldly and was not afraid. He was neither servile nor overbearing as he retorted. Everyone's eyes lit up and their hearts were shocked. What kind of heroic spirit was this? The 3 elders of Qingfeng Sword Sect smiled coldly and turned to leave. Their hearts were unusually sullen, and blood was stuck in their chests. This time, not only did their plan not succeed, but they were also repeatedly contradicted by a junior. Not a single disciple of their sect came out. It could be said that they suffered the most losses. It is good for young people to be arrogant, but they must know how to be neither arrogant nor impatient. Otherwise, it will be difficult for them to achieve great things. Elder Yao looked at Chu Mu with his hands behind his back and slightly raised his head. There was a trace of contempt in his expression as he said lightly. He did not take Chu Mu's words seriously, and his impression of Chu Mu plummeted. Thank you for your help, Elder. Chu Mu did not take it seriously and saluted Elder Yao with his sword. No matter what Elder Yao said, it would not affect Chu Mu. However, Elder Yao's help was real. Therefore, Chu Mu saluted with his sword as a form of courtesy and gratitude. Elder Luo, this time our three sects have suffered heavy losses. There are some things that we need to understand clearly, so we will take our leave for now. Elder Yao did not even look at Chu Mu. He saluted Elder Luo with his hands folded and smiled slightly. He then turned and left. Yao Bifeng looked back and also left. In the end, only the 3 elders and 6 disciples of Qingfeng Sword Sect were left in the small valley. Elder Luo looked around and then looked at the 6 elite disciples. He did not know what to feel. He seemed to be very happy and excited, but he could not be happy or excited. In short, he was a little depressed. If there is anything, we will talk about it in detail when we return to Qingfeng Sword Sect. Elder Luo put his sword back into the scabbard and sighed slowly. A series of small changes made him intuitively feel that something major must have happened in the void realm of Qinglan. Otherwise, there would not have been such heavy losses. Let's go. The other 2 elders also said. The group of 9 people immediately left the small valley and ran quickly along the rugged mountain road. They quickly rushed to Qingfeng Sword Sect. The trip to the void realm of Qinglan was finally over. Everything returned to silence. It was a new beginning. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 115. Qingfeng Sword Sect, Qingfeng Main Hall. Headmaster, Qinglan Sword Sect is too arrogant. They dared to violate the agreement of the 3 sects and let a disciple of the peak of 10th stage disguise as a 9th stage elite disciple to enter the virtual realm. This time, if it weren't for Chu Mu, I'm afraid that all the elite disciples of our sect would have died in the virtual realm. After listening to Chu Mu's report, Elder Luo was furious. He slammed the back of the chair with one hand and stood up abruptly, his black hair dancing wildly. This time, he was the leader of the team. If all 20 elite disciples died in the virtual realm, regardless of whether the sect would punish him or not, there would be a pit in his heart that he could not overcome. There would be a heart demon. Once there was a heart demon, it would mean that he could no longer improve in the future. He might even be dispirited because of it. The other 3 academy heads and elders all had faces full of anger. Their eyes flickered and the aura they emitted filled the main palace. It was like a sword aura killing intent, causing Chu Mu, who was in the middle of it, to feel even more unbearable pressure. He had no choice but to use all of his strength to resist and barely hold on. All right, restrain your breath, Luo Tianxiong said immediately. Naturally, there was a sense of power and dominance. The elders reacted and quickly retracted their murderous breath. Chu Mu breathed a sigh of relief. Chu Mu, this time, on behalf of the entire Qingfeng Sword Sect, I thank you. After saying that, Luo Tianxiong stood up and saluted Chu Mu with his sword. This made Chu Mu's heart tremble. Headmaster, I am also a disciple of Qingfeng Sword Sect, Chu Mu said with a serious face and saluted back to Luo Tianxiong. No matter what, it is a great honor for Qingfeng Sword Sect to have you. Luo Tianxiong sat down again and looked at Chu Mu with a gratified face. Returning from the virtual realm must be very tiring. How about this, the remaining matters will be handled by me and the other headmasters. Even if we have to go to war with Qinglan Sword Sect, we must do it. Go back and rest well and wait for the result. In the future, there will be even greater challenges waiting for you. Yes, Sect Master, fellow sect heads and elders, Chu Mu will take his leave first. Chu Mu nodded and said slowly. After saluting the sect master, principal, and elders, he turned and walked out of the main hall, heading towards the elite disciple area. As for Li Yi and the others, they returned to their respective pavilions to rest upon returning to the sword sect. Although the trip to the empty realm of Qinglan was a fruitful one and his strength had improved significantly, his nerves had always been tense. Now that he could relax, he felt a burst of fatigue. Therefore, relaxing and resting was the best way to recuperate. When a swordsman cultivates, they must know how to combine their relaxation with each other in order to achieve greater progress and breakthroughs. Blindly being tense will only be detrimental to oneself. Senior brother, you're back. Li Wei's face was filled with excitement. Yes. Chu Mu let out a slight smile and nodded his head. He felt a small warmth. Your cultivation is about to reach the peak of the 6th phase. Not bad. It seems that after a while, you will be able to break through to the 7th phase and become an inner disciple. Senior brother, even if I break through to stage 7, I will still be your sword maid. Li Wei blurted out. After saying that, her face turned red. Haha, good. Chu Mu immediately laughed out loud and immediately said, Help me get a set of clean clothes, I want to take a hot bath. Yes, senior brother. Li Wei nodded and quickly turned around. She only felt her cheeks burning. She was so embarrassed. How could she say something like that? For a moment, Li Wei's heart was in a mess. In the empty realm of Qinglan, Chu Mu did not take a bath at all. First of all, when his cultivation broke through to stage 9, his body would be purified once and his body would become much more transparent. Second of all, there was no condition to do so. Now that he was taking a hot bath and flowing through his body, especially in such a late winter time, this feeling was really comfortable and refreshing. After taking a bath, Chu Mu soaked his body in a big bucket full of hot water. Soaking in it, his whole body was indescribably comfortable. After soaking for a full hour, the water was cold. Chu Mu then got up, dressed and went to the 2nd floor. Li Wei's heart had already calmed down. When she saw Chu Mu, she quickly said, Senior brother, Sister Luo came to see you just now. Sister Luo? Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a touch of doubt, and then he immediately understood. Did she say why she was looking for me? She didn't say anything. She just left when she saw that you were not back yet. Li Wei said. Well, I'm going to rest today. If someone is looking for me, if it's not important, reject them all. Chu Mu nodded and said, Okay, senior brother. Li Wei quickly nodded and agreed. She was sincerely happy to be able to do something for her senior brother. Li Wei went downstairs. Chu Mu lay on the bed and covered himself with the quilt. He did not think about anything and slowly fell into a deep sleep. He began to rest and recover from the depths of his soul. This sleep, Chu Mu slept for a very long time. He slept until the next dawn when he woke up naturally. He only felt that he was full of energy and refreshed. Everything around him seemed to have become clearer, and even his soul seemed to have become stronger. Waving his fists, kicking his legs and twisting his body, the bones all over his body made a crackling sound like beans being fried. He tried his best to stretch his body. Not long after, Chu Mu felt that the blood in his body was flowing as if it was about to boil. The chill that had attacked him in the morning had also faded a lot. This time, most of the harvest in Qinglan's empty realm was handed over to the sword faction. He only kept a small part for himself. Although there was not much left, it was the real essence of what he had. A yellow-level supreme sword chi technique, a yellow-level upper sword chi technique, a complete high-level sword technique, a pseudo-sword, 3 stones that contained pure spiritual energy, 2 red blood fruits, and the most important Qinglan divine fruit. Qingfeng sword faction naturally knew that the disciples must have their own collection, but they did not ask the disciples to hand it all over. For the sword faction, the many spiritual medicines that the disciples had handed over had already surpassed the harvest of any previous trip to Qinglan empty realm. It was several times more than the previous harvest, which made the higher-ups very happy. They did not know that Chu Mu's harvest was so rich. Otherwise, they would have been tempted. Yao Ri's cultivation is at the Qi transformation realm. According to Elder Luo's estimation, he may break through to Deshang within 5 years. By then, he will be even stronger. In addition, in the entire Qinglan sword faction, there are swordsmen who are stronger than Yao Ri, just like the 2 supreme elders who guard the entrance of Qingfeng Cave. Chu Mu walked to the balcony and said to himself, "Within 10 years, I want to challenge the Qinglan sword faction. It seems that it will not be easy. At least, my cultivation must reach the Qi transformation realm or even Deshang." The words that Chu Mu said in front of the elders of the three factions were not said in a moment of anger, nor was it a joke. It was a kind of sharpness that came from the heart, a manifestation of the anger in his heart. Regardless of whether it was a swordsman or a swordsman, the sharpness should be restrained when it needed to be restrained and shown when it needed to be shown. Under the circumstances at that time, Chu Mu was the focus of attention and was targeted again and again. His heart was already very angry. If he did not show it and just kept suppressing it, it would not be good for him. Therefore, it was not only a kind of vent but also a kind of spur to himself. Within 10 years, he wanted to challenge the Qinglan sword faction. Walking to the balcony, he breathed in the cold air and looked at the still dim scenery. Chu Mu slowly glanced around and then withdrew his gaze. He sat down cross-legged, took out the Shang Yuan sword Qi manual, and carefully read it. "Now that my sword Qi cultivation has reached the peak of the 9th stage, I will reach the 10th stage if I have another breakthrough. But before that, I will first change to the Shang Yuan sword Qi manual to make the sword Qi purer and more vigorous," he said secretly. With the help of a little light, Chu Mu carefully read the Shang Yuan sword Qi manual. They were both Shang Yuan sword Qi manuals, so to some extent there were similarities. Therefore, Chu Mu did not seem to have too much difficulty. The Shang Yuan sword Qi manual was naturally more exquisite and profound than the Zhong Yuan sword Qi manual. Even with Chu Mu's understanding, he only began to understand after reading it 3 times. He carefully read it from the beginning a few times and gradually understood the Shang Yuan sword Qi manual thoroughly. Compared to the Zhong Yuan sword Qi manual, the Shang Yuan sword Qi manual had 2 more stages, a total of 7 stages. Moreover, the Shang Yuan sword Qi that was cultivated from the Shang Yuan sword Qi manual was not only purer and more vigorous than the Zhong Yuan sword Qi manual, but when cultivated to the 7th stage of the Shang Yuan sword Qi manual, the Xiantian sword Qi would automatically condense within the body. Xiantian sword Qi. Chu Mu was slightly excited. He had already seen the power of Xiantian sword Qi. It was very powerful. If he could condense Xiantian sword Qi before the Qi transformation stage, it would be another trump card. After completely comprehending it, he put away the Shang Yuan sword Qi manual and Li Wei brought out the freshly made steaming hot breakfast. "Xiao Wei, I will be away for a few days," Chu Mu said as he ate. "Ah, senior brother just came back and you are leaving again?" Li Wei's small face wrinkled as she said reluctantly. "I am going to the training room in the main hall to cultivate the sword Qi manual," Chu Mu said. "All right, I will wait for senior brother's return." Li Wei immediately smiled. She was going to cultivate the sword Qi manual instead of leaving again. This was one of the differences between the elite disciples and the inner disciples of the 3 colleges. When the inner disciples changed to the sword Qi manual, they completed it in their own pavilions, but when the elite disciples changed to the sword Qi manual, they had specially prepared training rooms. The training rooms were behind the main hall. They were made of extremely hard black rock, comparable in hardness to the 100-tempered sword. Because of the high cost of constructing such training rooms, the Qingfeng sword sect had only built 2 of them. After Chu Mu expressed his intentions to the elder, he entered one of the training rooms. The heavy stone door slowly closed behind him. The training room was not large, only about 30 square meters. There were 4 luminous pearls embedded in the ceiling, illuminating the entire room, but not blinding. It was as bright as day. The room was empty except for a prayer mat in the middle. Chu Mu looked around, then walked to the prayer mat and sat down cross-legged. He cleared his mind of distracting thoughts and recalled the chants of the Shang Yuan sword Qi manual. Then, he began to dissipate the Zhong Yuan sword Qi in his body. "If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 116. Chu Mu once again experienced the pain of his meridians being sliced by a sword. It was a pain that came from every part of his body. The pain was unbearable, and his expression changed drastically. He clenched his teeth and did not make a sound. The purer and stronger one's sword chi was, the more intense and obvious the pain would be when the sword chi was dispersed. If one could not withstand the pain, they would be in danger. Therefore, many swordsmen with strong sword chi would not easily switch to sword chi techniques, unless the difference between the two sword chi techniques was too great. Chu Mu's willpower was incomparably strong and unshakable. He endured the pain and deliberately maintained his consciousness. After the middle origin sword chi had completely dispersed and filled his meridians, he followed the incantation of the upper origin sword chi technique and channeled it. At the beginning, the channeling was very difficult, but under Chu Mu's perseverance, the first strand of middle origin sword chi slowly transformed into upper origin sword chi. After the most difficult step began, with the help of this strand of upper origin sword chi, the rest of the scattered sword chi merged and transformed bit by bit. The pain gradually faded away, and Chu Mu was completely immersed in the cultivation of the upper origin sword chi technique. It was best not to be disturbed when switching to sword chi techniques, and also not to be interrupted midway. Otherwise, the effects would be greatly reduced. After a day's time, Chu Mu had already transformed all the scattered sword chi into upper origin sword chi, and cultivated to the second level of the upper origin sword chi. After the second day, Chu Mu had already cultivated to the third level, and was close to the fourth. After the third day, under the channeling of sword chi, he seemed to have broken through something and reached the fifth level. After another full cycle of channeling, Chu Mu left the state of cultivation and opened his eyes. His clear pupils suddenly emitted a sharp light that pierced through the void. In that instant, the light seemed to be even brighter than the light emitted by the luminous pearls on the roof. The bright light shot into the void, leaving behind two traces that slowly dissipated. Chu Mu opened his mouth slightly and exhaled a breath that shot out like a sword. The sword chi cultivated from the fifth level of the upper essence, sword chi art, is 30% purer and thicker than the sword chi cultivated from the fifth level of the middle essence, sword chi art. After Chu Mu carefully sensed the sword chi in his body, he was secretly excited. Within the same level, the purer and denser the sword chi, the more powerful one would be. Although Chu Mu's current cultivation was still at the peak of stage 9, his overall strength had increased by 30 to 40% compared to a few days ago. Now that I've finished cultivating the sword chi art, my overall strength has increased. Next, I'll review how to use the dual swords and look for an opportunity to break through to stage 10. Chu Mu got up and said to himself, "Oh right, there's still the Qinglan sacred fruit. I'll have to go to the Sword Faction's library pavilion first to learn more about it. It'll be helpful for me to consume the fruit. In addition, there's also the 3 stones that contain pure spiritual energy. I wonder what they're called?" Soon after, a sword aura shot out and hit a certain part of the wall. Immediately, a creaking sound rang out and the heavy stone door of the cultivation room slowly lifted up. Chu Mu's body flashed and he charged out of the cultivation room. After saluting the elder who was in charge of the cultivation room, he quickly left and returned to the pavilion of the elite disciple area. It just so happened that Luo Yuling was there. As soon as she saw Chu Mu, Luo Yuling suddenly stood up and stared at Chu Mu with a very excited look. Her hands were grabbing the corners of her clothes and constantly rubbing them. At this time, Chu Mu's mind was completely focused on the dual swords and the Qinglan sacred fruit. He did not pay much attention to it at all. Therefore, after a few words with Luo Yuling, he let Luo Yuling practice the swordsmanship again and pointed out the key points in it and sent Luo Yuling away. Li Wei looked at the side and secretly felt a little happy. As a woman, she naturally saw that Luo Yuling seemed to have some feelings of admiration for Chu Mu. She could not help but feel a little jealous. However, whether it was appearance, background or cultivation, Luo Yuling was above her. She did not have any qualifications to compete at all. At this time, when she saw that Chu Mu's attitude towards Luo Yuling was very ordinary and there was no trace of nostalgia, she felt very comfortable in her heart. It was as sweet as eating honey. After sending Luo Yuling away, Chu Mu asked casually, "Xiao Wei, is there anything going on these 3 days?" "Senior, the day before yesterday, Big Brother and the others came to see you. Yesterday, it was Senior Xie Chunlei who came to see you," Li Wei quickly said, "but they didn't say anything." "Well, I know." Chu Mu nodded. This was expected. He turned and walked up to the second floor. He took the fake Qinfeng sword and the fake fire python sword and went to the training platform in the elite disciple area. Whether it was in the 3 academies or in the main hall, in the area where the inner or elite disciples lived, there was a training platform built for the disciples to practice their swordsmanship. However, because there were not many elite disciples in the first place, and because of the trip to the Qinglan virtual realm, there were only 20 or so left. Because of various other reasons. When Chu Mu came to the training platform, there was only one person practicing swordsmanship. Xie Chunlei. Chu Mu looked from afar and recognized the person who was practicing swordsmanship because he only had one arm. Senior Chu. Xie Chunlei had just finished practicing his swordsmanship and wiped the sweat on his forehead. From the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of a figure approaching. He turned his head and was slightly stunned at first. Then, there was a bit of excitement in his eyes. He quickly saluted Chu Mu with his sword. Now, in the hearts of all the disciples of the Qinfeng sword sect, Chu Mu's position was not lower than Li Yi's. Therefore, except for Li Yi and the other 2 and Xiao Qianfeng, the other disciples regarded Chu Mu as their senior. "Hello." Chu Mu returned the salute. "Senior brother, thank you for the red blood fruit. Otherwise, I don't know how long it would take for me to recover." Xie Chunlei seemed to have found a topic to talk about and said sincerely. He was sincere and grateful from the bottom of his heart. "In the future, if you need my help, please be sure to let me know. I will do my best to do it." "You are too polite." Chu Mu smiled and said, "We are brothers, so it is natural for us to help each other. No matter what, without Senior Chu this time, I would have died in the Qinglan virtual realm. Senior Chu, you have saved my life," Xie Chunlei said solemnly with a sincere and serious face. Chu Mu nodded. He could see that Xie Chunlei was the kind of person who was stubborn. Once he confirmed something, it would be difficult to change his mind. "How is it? After losing an arm, are you not as free as before when practicing swordsmanship? Senior brother, please enlighten me." Xie Chunlei's mind was flexible. He had just practiced swordsmanship a few times. The originally skillful swordsmanship always seemed to lack something, and it was difficult to fully exert its power. At this time, when he heard Chu Mu's words, he suddenly felt like he was in a desperate situation. "Don't worry, this is a normal situation." Chu Mu immediately smiled and said, "The human arm has the effect of adjusting the balance. When you lose a left arm, it is equivalent to the balance of the body being broken. So whether it is practicing swordsmanship or doing other things, it will more or less be affected. The solution is not difficult. That is, you need some time to adapt. Practice more and use your right hand more to adjust the balance of the body. When the time comes, there will be no problem." "I see." Xie Chunlei listened and showed a look of realization. He quickly bowed to Chu Mu again and said, "Senior brother, thank you for your guidance." "Well, even if I didn't say it, you will slowly find out." Chu Mu said, "Let's not talk about it anymore. Practice." "Okay." Xie Chunlei was straightforward and started cultivating again. However, this time, because he had the confidence of Chu Mu's words, he wasn't as lost and anxious in his heart. With this in mind, it was natural for him to appear more stable when he cultivated. Moreover, he could immerse himself wholeheartedly in it and carefully feel the subtle changes that existed within it. This would be of great help to him in familiarizing himself with and mastering his current body faster. Chumu walked to a corner of the sword practice platform and pulled out 2 swords, one in each hand. His feet were naturally slanted apart. His right hand held the fake Clear Wind sword and pointed it forward. His left hand held the fake Fire Python sword and pressed it against his back. He quickly eliminated all distracting thoughts. His expression was indifferent, but his eyes became sharper little by little. They shone with an extremely threatening light, like 2 rays of sword light. Soon after, his right hand trembled, and a sword slashed upward. His left hand followed suit, and a sword slashed upward. 2 slightly different colored sword lights moved slowly, as if oars were moving across the water. At the beginning, Chumu's movements were very slow, as if he was practicing Tai Chi. This was because he had not practiced the dual sword technique for a long time, so he was somewhat unfamiliar with it. Gradually, as he drew his swords, Chumu's instincts seemed to be awakened. The various essences of the dual sword technique quickly flowed through his mind. His movements of swinging the 2 swords also gradually sped up. Shio-shio sounds began to sounding very sharp. 2 rays of sword light of different colors revolved around Chumu's body. They constantly flashed and were very sharp. The 2 rays of sword light were sometimes straight, sometimes curved, and sometimes strangely passed through each other. They crossed each other and moved in opposite directions. On the other hand, Chumu's footsteps were messy and broken. He stepped here and there on the ground, changing unpredictably. You could see his every step, but you couldn't predict where his next step would land. Adding on that gorgeous sword light, it was dazzling. The sound of air being torn apart became sharper and sharper. Chumu's swinging movements also became faster and faster. Although there was no sword aura attached to the blade, nor was there any sword aura, the sharpness of the fake sword was still very terrifying. The air seemed incomparably fragile. The dual sword technique was completely different from the single sword technique. It required the correct movement to be used. Otherwise, not only would the power and essence of the dual sword technique not be displayed, but it would also affect one's strength and even injure oneself. Practicing dual swords was more difficult than practicing single swords. The difficulty was several times higher, and it required more talent. In the world of swordsmen, people who could control dual swords were often 30% or more stronger than other swordsmen of the same level. According to Chumu's understanding, the mastery of the dual sword technique was divided into 4 levels: entry, small success, deshang, and perfection. Even with Chumu's amazing talent in swordsmanship, he was only at the entry level of the dual sword technique because he did not major in it. The mark of entry was to be able to wield dual swords at the same time. The dual swords would not restrict each other, causing one's strength to be unable to be displayed. Only when one reached the small success level would the true power of the dual sword technique begin to appear. Now, Chumu suddenly had the idea of mastering the dual sword technique because of the fake Fire Python sword. If necessary, it could be used as a trump card. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 117. From then on, Chumu had an additional item on his training list: dual sword arts. However, Chumu did not receive a complete teaching of the dual sword arts. When he was on Earth, he had only found the introductory and part of the essences, as well as some simple descriptions of deshang and perfection. Therefore, on the path of cultivating the dual sword arts, it was decided that Chumu would have to fumble around on his own. The difficulty would be 10 times more difficult than cultivating a single sword. Even with Chumu's powerful perception, he did not have any clues at the moment. He could only take out 2 hours every day to cultivate the dual sword arts and try his best to familiarize himself with it. In addition, he would search for clues and feelings while cultivating, and slowly deduce them. After finding some time, Chu Mu applied to an elder of the sword faction to enter the main hall's library. The books in the library were not about sword chi arts, swordsmanship, movement techniques, or secret technique. They were mainly books about the general knowledge of the ancient sword continent and so on. Among them were things commonly seen in the Eastern Sword region, especially in the Great Koan dynasty. Chu Mu followed the book list and looked at the introduction on the side of the book. He roughly knew what this book mainly recorded and described. This way, it would be easier for him to search. The main palace's book storing pavilion actually wasn't very large. Inside, there weren't more than 100 ancient books. Therefore, Chu Mu quickly swept through nearly 100 ancient books and gradually had an idea in his heart. Walking to a row of bookshelves, he reached out and took out a book. The cover had the words "Ferocious Beast Encyclopedia" on it. Then, he turned around and took out a "Spiritual Medicine Encyclopedia" from another row of bookshelves. Finally, Chu Mu found a "Miscellaneous Wonderland." Although he wanted to read through all the books in the library to broaden his horizons and increase his knowledge, Chu Mu also knew that haste made waste. It would take a long time to finish reading nearly 100 books. Therefore, he only chose the 3 books that were most useful to him at the moment. After registering them, he brought them back to his own building. Chu Mu had to return these 3 books within 3 months. In 3 months, with his ability, not only would he be able to finish reading them, but he would also be able to memorize all of the content. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Every day, Chu Mu practiced the Shangyuan sword chi technique at a fixed time, constantly purifying his own sword chi. He had already reached the peak of level 9, which was almost equivalent to stepping into level 10. According to Chu Mu's own estimation, under normal circumstances, he would be able to break through to level 10 in about 2 or 3 months and become a level 10 sword chi realm swordsman. Thinking that after his cultivation broke through to level 10, there seemed to be another place to go, Chu Mu could not help but feel a little curious. He wanted to ask about it and understand it clearly. However, his cultivation was about to break through, so he put this curiosity aside. Everything would be clear after he broke through. In addition to practicing the Shangyuan sword chi technique, Chu Mu mainly spent the rest of his time on practicing the golden edge swordsmanship, the rolling cloud swordsmanship, the following cloud swordsmanship, and the dual swordsmanship. Currently, the swordsmanships he had mastered were the basic swordsmanship, the entry-level swordsmanship, the flying cloud swordsmanship, the low-level swordsmanship, the soft cloud swordsmanship, the high wind swordsmanship, and the following cloud swordsmanship, the mid-level swordsmanship, the clear wind swordsmanship, the rolling cloud swordsmanship, and the following cloud swordsmanship, and the high-level swordsmanship, the golden edge swordsmanship. As for the sword skills, there were the mid-level swordsmanship, the green wolf double kill, the green wolf howling at the moon, the self-created shocking cloud kill, and the surpassing level sword skill, the form of wind, which he had inherited from the painting of wind. Regardless of whether it was the swordsmanship or the sword skills, Chu Mu spent time and effort to practice them. Therefore, the flying cloud swordsmanship and the soft cloud swordsmanship were combined to create the mid-level sword skill, shocking cloud kill. Now, Chu Mu was about to perfect the rolling cloud swordsmanship and the following cloud swordsmanship, and then extract the essence of these 2 swordsmanships and integrate them into the shocking cloud kill. Once it was completed, the power of the shocking cloud kill would definitely increase significantly. It might even reach the bottleneck of a high-level sword skill. As for the soaring wind swordsmanship and the breeze swordsmanship, Chu Mu had already perfected them. He was also wondering if he should integrate the essence of the soaring wind swordsmanship into the breeze swordsmanship to increase the power of the breeze swordsmanship. However, because he possessed the surpassing level sword skill, the form of wind, and had also mastered the theory of the form of wind, he had also simplified it. As long as his cultivation level increased, he would be able to perform the simplified version of the form of wind. It would be extremely powerful and would be a trump card. Therefore, Chu Mu temporarily put aside the fusion of the wind swordsmanship. After all, he needed time to practice the high-level golden edge swordsmanship. He had to master this swordsmanship as soon as possible and master it until he reached Deshang's level of perfection. Only then would he be able to fully unleash its power. As for the Green Wolf swordsmanship, the Green Wolf double kill, and the Green Wolf howling at the moon, Chu Mu thought that if it was possible, he would integrate them into a single sword skill, which would be even more powerful. However, this was only a theoretical idea at the moment. It had not been put into practice yet. Time. Chu Mu felt that he needed time too much. He had never needed time as much as he did now. There were too many things that he needed to do. After half a month, he had finished reading the 3 ancient books. They were all engraved in his mind. It turns out that the so-called holy fruit does not necessarily have a name. It is called the holy fruit of Qinglan because it appeared in the virtual realm of Qinglan. If it appeared in other virtual realms, it would have another name. The holy fruit is also divided into grades. The holy fruit that I have is between the upper grade and the supreme grade. It can also be regarded as a semi-supreme grade. It is only useful for swordsmen below the Qi transformation realm. Closing the book, Chu Mu silently said, "This sacred fruit's effect, when eaten alone, can only raise 7th to 10th rank cultivation talent by 1 rank. For 1st to 6th rank, it doesn't have much of an effect. The restriction is very large. However, my cultivation has not yet reached the Qi transformation realm, and my cultivation talent is only at level 9. It is just right for me. If I grind the horn of the dead wood horned python into powder and mix it with the holy fruit, the efficacy of the holy fruit can be maximized. It is also possible to increase the cultivation talent by 2 grades. It can also increase the cultivation talent from level 7 to level 6. It is really amazing." After reading the ancient book, Chu Mu had already understood everything that he needed to know. What Wei Hong said that day was not false. Moreover, Chu Mu also knew that the 3 stones that contained pure spiritual energy were called spirit stones. According to the identification method, they were lower-grade spirit stones. At the same time, Chu Mu also knew that only swordsmen in the Qi transformation realm could absorb spiritual energy from spirit stones. He was an exception. In that case, I will start to improve my cultivation talent. Chu Mu slowly stood up and said to Li Wei. Then, he left the pavilion with the holy fruit of Qinglan, the horn of the dead wood horned python, and the 3 ancient books. He once again went to the main hall. First, he returned the 3 ancient books to the library. Then, he went to the alchemy room to grind the horn of the dead wood horned python into powder and mixed it with a glass of water. Once again, Chu Mu went to the cultivation room and applied to enter again. This Chu Mu used the cultivation room not long ago. Why is he using it again? The elder in charge of the cultivation room was puzzled. After all, the elite disciples rarely came to the cultivation room. Forget it. As the first disciple of the sect, it will always be special. The heavy stone door of the cultivation room was closed. Chu Mu sat cross-legged on the soft futon and took out the holy fruit of Qinglan. Chu Mu closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. He got rid of all distracting thoughts. Then, he picked up the glass of water mixed with the horn of the dead wood horned python and poured it into his mouth. This thing had no taste at all. It was dry and tasted like chewing wax. Chu Mu did not taste it carefully. He picked up the holy fruit of Qinglan and threw it into his mouth. Suddenly, his mouth was full of juice. The sour taste made Chu Mu frown. It was 5 or 6 times more sour than a sour lemon. If he had not been mentally prepared, he would have spat it out as soon as it entered his mouth. It was a waste of the holy fruit. It was as if he was forcing himself to swallow it. The sour taste entered his body from his esophagus. It was so sour that Chu Mu trembled uncontrollably. He almost could not sit still. This feeling could not be described with words. The pores all over his body opened up, his scalp was numb, and he had goosebumps. The mixture of acid and water produced a strange change in his body. It suddenly turned into a strange force that was different from spiritual energy and sword chi. It began to spread around his body little by little, penetrating into the meridians, bones, blood, and muscles of his body and constantly exploding. Chu Mu immediately had a strange feeling. This feeling was completely different from carrying the sword chi. It was a change that really came from the depths of his body. It felt as if it began to change from the depths of his cells. At this moment, some of the things in his body that could not be touched no matter how much he cultivated were touched. The impurities and filth contained in them were all shattered and annihilated under the impact of this strange explosion. The things that were originally good were further strengthened. It was a magical feeling that could not be described. Chu Mu's consciousness became in a trance. It was as if he had left his body. His mind wandered and floated. He seemed to be able to clearly feel the various changes in his body. It was as if there was a small universe exploding in his body. The changes were unpredictable. It was as if he was dreaming when he was half asleep and half awake. It was unrealistic. It felt as if a century had passed, but also as short as a second. Chu Mu suddenly woke up. It was as if he had slept enough. He was full of energy and his mind was unusually clear. It seemed that he could even clearly feel the flow of the air around him. With a thought, his body reacted like lightning. He jumped up gently. Chu Mu suddenly felt that his body was unprecedentedly light. It was as if his weight had been reduced by half. He could move more quickly and freely than before. He landed softly and silently, like a feather falling. Looking around, Chu Mu's eyes were shining. There was a faint smile on his face, and he was slightly excited. Although he did not know whether his cultivation talent had risen to level 8 or level 7, Chu Mu was very clear that his cultivation talent must have surpassed level 9. He sat down again, closed his eyes, and cleared his mind. His mind quickly calmed down. Even his breathing became long and slow, as if it had disappeared. He looked inside himself and carefully felt the changes in his body. From his dantian as the starting point, he followed the meridians, bones, blood, and muscles. Chu Mu felt as if he had been reborn. This was a qualitative change. It was a deep internal change in the body. It could not be seen from the outside. His heart unconsciously moved. A flash of inspiration naturally flashed through his mind. It was purely an instinct. The upper origin sword chi in his dantian was naturally transported out of his dantian. It followed the meridians that had been changed from the inside and started to circulate. Suddenly, Chu Mu acutely felt that the speed at which the sword chi was transported had at least doubled. In other words, the time it took for him to transport a great cycle was now half of what it used to be. Not long after, the first great cycle was completed. The second great cycle continued without stopping. Chu Mu could now transport 30 great cycles. One great cycle at a time. Not long after, Chu Mu completed the 30th great cycle. The sword chi followed the meridians and returned to his dantian. Just as Chu Mu was about to stop, the sword chi in his dantian suddenly shook. It sped up uncontrollably and then rushed out of his dantian. It was as if a precious sword had been unsheathed and wreaked havoc in his meridians. Wherever the berserk sword chi passed, Chu Mu's expression changed slightly. He only felt that his meridians were about to be torn apart. There was a burst of pain, causing him to involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. In a flash, the berserk sword chi automatically circulated one great cycle and then quickly moved to the second great cycle. Chu Mu guarded his mind. He felt that something big was about to happen. He looked internally at the berserk sword chi in his meridians. He was surprised to find that his meridians seemed to be expanding bit by bit, although it was not obvious. Suddenly, Chu Mu's ears seemed to ring with muffled thunder-like noises. The rumbling continued without end. The sword aura in his meridians suddenly paused and exploded. It circulated at a speed several times faster than before. After one round, it all rushed into his dantian and filled it up, as if it was going to burst his dantian. Chu Mu's mind shook unconsciously. In a moment of daze, it was as if his soul had exploded. When he came back to his senses, everything around him had become clearer. He seemed to be able to feel the spiritual chi around him. What's going on? Chu Mu was puzzled at first. He carefully sensed it and found that his sword chi seemed to have become thicker and purer. He could not help but be overjoyed. My sword chi cultivation base has broken through indeed. Chu Mu's sword chi cultivation base had broken through from the peak of the 9th stage to the beginning of the 10th stage. The quantity of sword chi had doubled, and its purity had doubled as well. It had become even more powerful. Following that, Chu Mu tried to move the external sword chi. He found that the range of the external sword chi had increased from 6 meters to 7 meters. Cultivation talent has increased. Sword chi cultivation base has broken through. The range of the external sword chi has increased. This can be considered as 3 consecutive blessings. Muttering to himself, Chu Mu stretched out a finger. As the upper yuan sword chi moved, a sharp and threatening pale white light shot out from his finger. In an instant it had reached half an inch, its sharpness unparalleled. With a light stroke of his finger, the air was sliced in half like a cake, leaving behind a clear white mark. A 10th phase swordsman is able to condense a sword gleam. The might of the sword gleam is much greater than that of sword chi. Withdrawing the sword chi, Chu Mu's heart gradually calmed down. He stood up, opened the heavy stone door, and walked out of the cultivation room. He explained to the elder and then headed towards the elite disciple area. This Chu Mu, in one cultivation room, his cultivation unexpectedly broke through to the 10th phase. He truly deserves to be called the number 1 disciple of the sect. This elder stared at Chu Mu's departing figure and sighed to himself. He had a feeling that comparing oneself to others would only infuriate oneself to death, and comparing goods to goods, one would throw away goods. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 118. With the improvement of his talent and the breakthrough of his cultivation, Chu Mu's footsteps were very fast. His whole body was almost flying as he quickly rushed to the elite disciple area. The wind that blew in his face slid across his cheeks and body. A unique and gentle touch was like a lover's gentle and delicate hand caressing his body. He felt like he was floating. Unknowingly, Chu Mu entered the elite disciple area. Then, he slowed down and walked step by step to his pavilion. Just then, a few figures walked out of his pavilion. It was Li Yi and the other 4, which made Chu Mu slightly stunned. "Junior brother, you're finally back." Li Yi and the others' eyes lit up as they strode over with smiles on their faces. "Junior brother, why can't I see through your cultivation? I've broken through to stage 10. Yuan Wenhua's eyes widened in surprise, as if he had discovered a new continent. This attracted the others to use their aura observation skill to look at Chu Mu. Their eyes were shining. "Junior brother, is your cultivation?" Li Yi and the others' eyes and mouths were wide open as they asked in surprise. "I've just broken through to stage 10. Chu Mu smiled slightly. He also found that in addition to him, Li Yi, Yuan Wenhua, Wang Tingo, and Xiao Qianfeng were all in the early stage of stage 10. Only Xie Chunlei was still at the peak of stage 9. Li Yi and the other 2 had already accumulated enough. Coupled with the trip to the empty realm of Green Orchid, it was expected that they would break through now. Xiao Qianfeng seemed to have a great adventure in the past few months. In the empty realm of green orchid, his cultivation had also improved by leaps and bounds. It was normal for him to break through. As for Chumu, it was because he had consumed the Qinglan sacred fruit. His talent had increased, and his cultivation had reached the limit of 9th phase peak. Only then was he able to break through. Xie Chunlei was originally at the late stage of stage 9. Although he finally broke through to the peak of stage 9 in the empty realm of green orchid, he did not have any special opportunities. Therefore, he was still at the peak of stage 9. There was still some distance to stage 10. When junior brother was at the peak of the 8th phase, he was already able to suppress us. Now that his sword energy cultivation is at the same level, we are even less of a match for him. Wang Tingo sighed. Li Yi and Yuan Wenhua nodded, but a hint of battle intent flashed across Xiao Qianfeng's eyes. Xie Chunlei stood to the side and didn't say anything, but his gaze towards Chu Mu was full of reverence. By the way, junior brother, the reason we're here is because the sect master has summoned you. Li Yi suddenly said, "Let's talk as we walk." Inside the main hall, sect master Luo Tianxiong and the other elders were present. Their eyes were shining like pearls as they stared at Chu Mu's group, sweeping their gazes over them. For a moment, Chu Mu's group was like a fat rabbit entering a wolf's den. Cough cough. Li Yi's scalp went numb. He hurriedly coughed twice and saluted with his sword. Elite disciple Li Yi greets the sect master and elders. Chu Mu and the others also saluted with their swords. Good, good, good. 3 goods in a row, each word stronger than the last. The last word even exploded in the main hall, echoing continuously. It was extraordinary. Luo Tianxiong's face was filled with excitement and surprise. His pupils trembled slightly as he pressed his hands on the back of his chair and suddenly stood up. A powerful and domineering aura surrounded him, and his laughter almost overturned the roof of the main hall. It's only been half a month, and you've all broken through to the 10th phase. Xie Chunlei hasn't, but his aura is more condensed. I estimate that he'll have no problem breaking through to the 10th phase in half a year. This is really a blessing for our sect. Elder Luo clapped his hands and laughed. Although 14 elite disciples had died, those who survived had become even more outstanding. It was a kind of comfort. The other elders also burst into laughter, their faces filled with joy. Headmaster, this time around there are even more disciples that will be able to go there. There are many more people than before, an elder said in a clear voice. Luo Tianxiong sat down again, like an unshakable mountain. His eyes fell on Chu Mu and the others. This time, I summoned you to tell you something. About the plan of Qinglan Sword Sect. After more than 10 days of debate and confrontation, the result has been decided. Qinglan Sword Sect has agreed to compensate Qingfeng Sword Sect and Qingshui Sword Sect. When Chu Mu and the others heard, they were secretly happy. This time, all 20 elite disciples of Qinglan Sword Sect had died, and one of them was at the peak of the 10th phase. Such a loss was very huge, more than 2 sections. Under such circumstances, it was very difficult to make Qinglan Sword Sect compromise and compensate. This was also due to the joint pressure of Qingfeng Sword Sect and Qingshui Sword Sect. After more than 10 days of stalemate, they finally compromised. This time, the spiritual medicine that you brought back from the void realm of Qinglan was more than any previous time. The alchemy room processed and refined the elixirs overnight, filling the inventory of elixirs. It is enough to last for quite a long time. For this, I would like to express my gratitude. Luo Tianxiong once again stood up, slightly bowed, and said, sitting back down, "Now that you have all broken through to the 10th phase of cultivation, our sect is unable to refine pills suitable for 10th phase swordsmen, and the chi-breaking pill is no longer of any use to you. However, perhaps you will still have a use for it. So, the 6 of you will each receive 1 bottle of chi-breaking pill, 3 bottles of chi-training pill, 5 bottles of chi-gathering pill, 2 bottles of great hemostasis pill, and 2 bottles of great cheer-restoring pill. In addition, the sword pavilion will be fully open to you. You will not need to pay any contribution points to read the secret manuals in the pavilion. When Chu Mu and the others heard this, their eyes suddenly lit up. All kinds of elixir rewards, only the great hemostasis pill and the cheer-restoring pill were effective for them. Although the others were ineffective, they might be useful in other ways. The most important reward was the later reward, which was the full opening of the sword pavilion. Although the Qingfeng sword sect was only a lower sword sect, and there were not many secret manuals in the sword pavilion, it was still very attractive to them, especially to Chu Mu. "Thank you very much, headmaster." Chu Mu and the others saluted and said, "Well, in these few months you have to work hard to cultivate. I hope that before you go there, you can go one step further. This way, you will have greater competitiveness." Luo Tianxiong nodded and encouraged. "Headmaster, where is that place?" Yuan Wenhua quickly asked. "That place?" Luo Tianxiong's eyes turned and seemed to become distant. He looked at the sky outside the main hall, and a flash of memory flashed through his mind. His tone became a little complicated. "Now that your cultivation has broken through to the 10th phase, Xie Chunlei's cultivation will be able to break through to the 10th phase in a while, and he is qualified to know about that place. That place is called the Lizhou Sword Academy. It is a swordsman's academy established by the royal family of the Great Kuan dynasty. The minimum requirement to enter the Lizhou Sword Academy is to be at the 10th phase of the Sword Qi realm, and must not be over 25 years old." Chu Mu and the others were shocked. The minimum requirement was to be at the 10th phase of the Sword Qi realm. This Lizhou Sword Academy was quite amazing. The purpose of the establishment of the Lizhou Sword Academy is to select outstanding young swordsmen for better training. I am not very clear about the mysteries of this. In short, all the sword sects in the Lizhou Sword Academy, once their disciples meet the requirements, most of them will be sent to the Sword Academy to study for 3 years. Entering the Sword Academy to study will also give them a better cultivation environment and conditions. Luo Tianxiong slowly said, "This is not only in our Lizhou Sword Academy, but also in other provinces." Chu Mu and the others nodded. They finally had a preliminary understanding of this so-called place. "Well, I have told you all that I can. Next, you will have to rely on yourselves. I have confidence in you." Luo Tianxiong's tone was full of encouragement. "Yes, headmaster. We will take our leave first." Chu Mu and the others saluted with their swords and turned to walk out of the main hall. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 119. The Sword Pavilion was fully open. Chu Mu's group of 6 immediately headed to the Sword Pavilion. The Sword Pavilion elder was guarding this place as usual. When he saw Chu Mu and the others, especially when he saw Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng, his eyes lit up and shot out an extremely sharp glint. A shocked expression flashed across his face. Without stopping them, the Sword Pavilion elder immediately let Chu Mu's group of 6 into the Sword Pavilion. He didn't light any incense either, because the sect master, Luo Tianxiong, had already sent someone to inform him beforehand. I really didn't expect Chu Mu's cultivation to improve so quickly. The Sword Pavilion elder stared at the entrance of the Sword Pavilion and muttered to himself. He sighed with emotion. He's not even 17 years old this year, but he's already at the 10th stage of the Sword Qi realm at the age of 16. Coupled with his unfathomable attainments in swordsmanship, his strength is unimaginable. Oh right, I wonder if he has comprehended sword force? And Xiao Qianfeng, his sharpness is extremely threatening. Ordinary swordsmen can't compare to him. Our Qingfeng sword sect is really lucky to have 2 such disciples. After Chu Mu's group of 6 entered the Sword Pavilion, they quickly spread out. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng entered the left Sword Pavilion, while Li Yi's group of 4 entered the right Sword Pavilion. The sword chi arts that Li Yi's group of 4 cultivated were only of the yellow class. Thus, they took this opportunity to choose a yellow class superior sword chi art each. As for Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng, Chu Mu had just changed to the origin sword chi art, which was of the yellow class. Xiao Qianfeng had obtained the endless sword Dao inheritance, so the sword chi art he cultivated wasn't of a low grade either. Thus, he didn't need it. After splitting up, Chu Mu directly entered the 3rd floor of the left sword pavilion. What made Chu Mu feel regretful was that the 3rd floor of the left sword pavilion contained very few swordsmanships, and there wasn't even a single secret technique. The swordsmanships on the 3rd floor were all of the superior sword arts. There were a total of 6 of them. 1 was of the fire element, 1 was of the thunder element, 1 was of the water element, 2 were of the cloud element, and 1 was of the metal element. Chu Mu looked through them one by one and felt even more regretful. The 6 advanced sword techniques were actually incomplete, which meant that they were missing the last advanced killer move. The headmaster, and the elders should have complete high-level swordsmanship. It seems that their swordsmanship is not recorded here. Chu Mu thought to himself and began to choose. He gave up on the fire, thunder, and water sword arts because of the metal edge sword art. In the end, he made a choice between the 2 cloud sword arts. One of them was the cloud sea swordsmanship, which was the swordsmanship that Li Yi practiced. It seemed that Li Yi had contributed it. The other one was called the cloud-shattering swordsmanship, which was completely different from the cloud sea swordsmanship. Chu Mu didn't hesitate and chose the 2 cloud series sword technique. Xiao Qianfeng, on the other hand, chose the incomplete metal attribute sword technique. They immediately left together. Li Yi and the others also had their own gains. They walked out of the right sword pavilion and entered the left sword pavilion. Not long after, Wang Tingo chose the incomplete lightning attribute sword technique. As for Li Yi, Chu Mu chose the 2 cloud series sword technique. He could only wait for Chu Mu to finish reading them before passing them to him. As for Yuan Wenhua, he could only wait for Xiao Qianfeng to pass the incomplete swordsmanship to him. The current sword pavilion was fully open to the 6 of them. Therefore, they could enter and choose at any time. This time, after registering their gains, they returned to the elite disciple area together. To them, such a harvest was more than enough. The sound of the air being torn apart was so sharp that it made one's scalp numb. Rays of faint golden sword light shot out like auroras and tore through the darkness before dawn. The dew was heavy and the sky was still slightly dark. The grass and trees around the elite disciples' sword training platform were condensed with a thick layer of frost, releasing an astonishing chill. If it were an ordinary person, they would definitely wrap the thick quilt tightly and continue to hide in the warm quilt to sleep. However, Chu Mu had already come to the sword training platform to practice his swordsmanship. The 13 styles of the golden blade, each style was so fierce, and each style was filled with an intense and shocking sharpness. This was a complete high-level swordsmanship obtained from the Green Orchid virtual realm. It was now the swordsmanship that Chu Mu focused on cultivating. 2 months had passed since he left the Green Orchid virtual realm. Chu Mu finally practiced the 13 basic styles of this swordsmanship to the level of Deshang. It was indeed the metal elemental swordsmanship that was famous for its sharpness. Each style was so fierce and so sharp. When it was performed, Chu Mu always felt that the air was being torn apart as if there was a material object. This feeling was different from the elegance and speed of the wind elemental swordsmanship. It was also different from the randomness of the cloud elemental swordsmanship. It was a kind of pure sharpness that pursued a little or a line of destruction, as if it was condensed to the extreme. During these 2 months, Chu Mu also had the opportunity to observe the incomplete metal elemental high-level swordsmanship that Xiao Qianfeng had chosen. He suddenly realized that the power of the incomplete metal elemental high-level swordsmanship was much weaker than the golden blade swordsmanship. It was not the difference in the final style. In the basic style, there was already a clear gap. In comparison, the Golden Blade swordsmanship focused more on the characteristics of the metal elemental swordsmanship. It fully displayed the sharpness of the metal elemental swordsmanship and was more inclined to a line of destruction. Chu Mu was the only one on the swordsmanship platform. The pseudo-clear wind sword in his hand was unbelievably swift and fierce. Every slash of the sword seemed to be able to cut through the hardest thing in the world. When the final slash was made, the faint golden luster seemed to condense into one in an instant. The slash tore through the darkness as if it had pierced through the void, leaving a thin and straight faint golden mark in the air. He withdrew his sword and stood there. After closing his eyes to regulate his breathing, he opened his eyes and exhaled a breath of white air that shot out like a sword. It shot out more than 2 meters before dissipating. Chu Mu's eyes were abnormally bright, making it impossible for others to look directly at him. The 13 basic styles of the Golden Blade swordsmanship have already become Deshang's. As for the final high-level killing move, after half a month of hard work, it can also become Deshang's now. Xiao Qin muttered to himself. His tone contained a shocking sharpness. Now, show me your sharpness. Let me see your might. The various essences of the killing move, space-splitting golden blade, flowed through Chu Mu's mind. His hands started to move as well. The sword qi in his body started to surge, spreading to his arms and moving towards the pseudo-clear wind sword. With the Deshang's basic style as a foundation, in addition to Chu Mu's extremely strong comprehension ability and the many times he had used it in the past half a month, he did not meet with any obstacles in his cultivation. A strange feeling arose in his heart. Subconsciously, Chu Mu infused the incomplete state of metal that he had comprehended earlier into the pseudo-clear wind sword. Faint golden threads actually appeared on the pseudo-clear wind sword. They quickly swam around, each thread releasing a threatening sharpness. Space-splitting golden blade. A voice that was filled with sharpness resounded in his heart. It seemed to pierce through the void as Chu Mu slashed out with his sword. This slash was not fast or slow. It looked ordinary, but the faint golden threads on it instantly condensed into one, turning into a thin, faint golden thread. It seemed to cut through the void and disappeared. In the air, there was a strange sharpness and sharpness. Chu Mu maintained his posture of slashing out with his sword. The sharpness in his eyes was unstoppable. 15 meters away, a neat crack suddenly appeared on a boulder that was as tall as a person. It slowly slid forward and fell to the ground with a loud bang. The fracture of this huge rock was as smooth as a polished mirror. There was a trace of coldness and sharpness. Suddenly, Chu Mu felt that his consciousness seemed to have undergone some changes. In an instant, various essences of the metal attribute appeared, giving rise to waves of comprehension. He had actually comprehended 10% of the state of metal after mastering the killing move, space-splitting golden blade, of the Golden Blade swordsmanship. I recommend a friend's book, Supreme Star Soul, for everyone to take a look. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 120. He casually stabbed out with his sword, and a faint golden light condensed into a golden needle, piercing through the void and shooting straight out, leaving a trace in the air that did not dissipate for a long time. With a clanging sound, he sheathed his sword. Only then did the light in Chu Mu's pupils slowly recede. His eyes became clear and calm. He leapt up and landed next to the broken boulder, carefully examining the fracture. He also stretched out a finger and gently slid it over the smooth surface of the fracture. He could vaguely feel a trace of amazing sharpness remaining in it. The power of the 13 styles of Golden Blade is more condensed than the general high-level gold swordsmanship. Its cutting power is also more powerful. The power of the killing move, the sky-splitting Golden Blade, is also very terrifying. Once it is used, it is difficult to detect it as if it is immersed in the void. If it is integrated with the gold essence, its power will be increased a lot. Withdrawing his finger, Chu Mu's eyes became deep. He secretly said, "Now, the sky-splitting golden blade can be my strongest killing move under the simplified version of the wind form. It is not easy to practice the golden blade swordsmanship to perfection. In the future, the focus of cultivation will have to be changed. I will focus on the cloud swordsmanship and the dual swordsmanship, with other swordsmanship as auxiliary. I can't fall behind in the cultivation of sword aura." Thinking of the cultivation of sword aura, Chu Mu naturally associated it with his cultivation talent. He could not help but smile. He had already done the test. His cultivation talent was now at level 7. In other words, after eating the holy fruit of Qinglan and grinding the horn of the dead wood-horned python, his cultivation talent had soared from level 9 to level 7. Level 7 cultivation talent was indeed far better than level 9 cultivation talent. According to Chu Mu's cultivation efficiency in the past 2 months and the previous situation, he got a rough figure: 4 times. That's right. The cultivation speed of a level 8 talent was twice as fast as that of a level 9 talent. Similarly, the cultivation speed of a level 7 talent was twice as fast as that of a level 8 talent, which was 4 times as fast as that of a level 9 talent. This meant that the effect of cultivating 1 cycle with a 7th grade talent was equivalent to cultivating 4 cycles with a 9th grade talent. The number of great Zhou days that Chu Mu could carry was more than 3 times that of an ordinary swordsman. Under normal circumstances, a 10th phase sword practitioner could carry 10 great circulations, but Chu Mu could carry 33 great circulations. Thus, in a short 2 months, his sword chi cultivation had neared the middle stage of the 10th phase. This kind of cultivation speed completely surpassed Li Yi and the rest. In addition, because Chu Mu was using inferior spirit stones to cultivate, his Shangyuan sword chi technique had already reached the peak of the 6th level. He was just 1 step away from breaking through to the 7th level. At that time, he would be able to condense the Xiantian sword chi that he had always dreamed of. Chu Mu, who had witnessed the power of Xiantian sword chi, was envious of it. When he thought about how he would soon be able to grasp Xiantian sword chi, he couldn't help feeling excited. In the blink of an eye, another 10 days had passed. Chu Mu held inferior spirit stones to cultivate his sword chi technique every day. Then, he would go to the sword training platform to practice various swordsmanship. Occasionally, he would spar with Li Yi and the rest. He even used the entry-level dual swordsmanship to fight against Li Yi, Yuan Hua, Wang Tingo, and Xie Chunlei. He completely had the upper hand. The entry-level dual swordsmanship would not limit one's strength, nor would it increase one's strength. Only when one reached the minor mastery would it increase one's strength by at least 30%. However, because he lacked the essence of it, Chu Mu was still unable to reach the minor mastery. Even so, the entry level was enough to make Li Yi and the rest gasp in amazement. Out of curiosity, they all gave it a try. They used the dual swordsmanship with both hands, but the result was that they were restrained. Not to mention using the swordsmanship, it was difficult for them to even make the usual smooth movements. It felt awkward, and they almost hurt themselves when they sped up. They were only giving it a try. The focus was still on the swordsmanship that they were cultivating. They did not dare to expect too much. On the 11th day, Chu Mu woke up early as usual. At this time, the winter had begun to pass. The weather was not that cold, but it still made people feel a little cold. And today, for Chu Mu, was a meaningful day. It was the 17th year since his body was born in this world. In other words, today was Chu Mu's 17th birthday. Such a day, other than himself, perhaps only Chu Xingyun and his wife would remember. Perhaps they were hoping that he could appear in front of them and make them happy. But this was just a thought. Exhaling, he also eliminated all kinds of emotions. He sat down cross-legged, held a piece of inferior spirit stone in his hand, closed his eyes, and calmed his heart. He cultivated the Shangyuan sword qi technique again. The pure spiritual qi from the inferior spirit stone seeped into his palm, followed the meridians in his arm, and merged with the Shangyuan sword qi in his body. The Shangyuan sword qi cultivated from the peak of the 6th level of the Shangyuan sword qi technique was even purer. The spiritual qi contained in the inferior spirit stone was also beyond Chu Mu's expectations. From the moment he obtained it until now, the pure spiritual qi in the same inferior spirit stone had not been completely absorbed by him. Wisps of pure spiritual qi continued to enter his meridians, and were transported by the sword qi. They were transformed into Shangyuan sword qi, and at the same time the Shangyuan sword qi was purified bit by bit. Chu Mu was completely immersed in cultivation, and one big cycle after another was transported. Unknowingly, the 33 big cycles were completed, but the time spent was almost half the time compared to before he switched to the Shangyuan sword qi technique. The last strand of Shangyuan sword qi was transported back into Chu Mu's dantian. Just as Chu Mu was about to stop, the Shangyuan sword qi in his dantian suddenly surged, and a deep rumbling sound was heard, as if his dantian was about to explode. Chu Mu quickly looked inside and found that the Shangyuan sword qi in his dantian was constantly colliding with each other, dispersing and reforming. Under this kind of dispersing and reforming, the Shangyuan sword qi became even purer. At some unknown time, the sword aura in his dantian stopped surging and regained its order. As for the upper origin sword aura, it was as if it had been reborn. Even Chu Mu could feel that at the center of the upper origin sword aura, there seemed to be an existence that slightly surpassed the upper origin sword aura. Chu Mu's dantian touched it slightly, and he felt a pain on the mental level, as if he had been cut by the edge of a sword. He had a guess and hurriedly withdrew his dantian. After a careful examination, he smiled from the bottom of his heart. The Shangyuan sword qi technique has finally broken through to the 7th level. It seems that the subtle existence that surpassed the Shangyuan sword qi in my dantian is about to automatically form a strand of Xiantian sword qi unavoidably. Chu Mu was excited again. He did not know how long it would take for this strand of Xiantian sword qi to automatically form. Once the Xiantian sword qi is completely formed, I'll have another trump card. When that time comes, if I use the Xiantian sword qi to activate the killer move Space Shattering Blade, its power will increase by a lot. I might even be able to threaten experts of the qi transformation stage. As he thought to himself, Chu Mu's excitement gradually calmed down. He stood up, took his 2 swords, and headed for the sword training platform again. It was close to noon. A bright sun hung high in the sky, emitting a warm but not scorching light. It illuminated the earth and nourished all living things. When it shone on one's body, it made one feel warm and comfortable in this early spring season. At the foot of Mount Qinglan, 2 lithe figures were leaping and leaping. They were extremely fast, and the rugged mountain roads were no obstacle to them. They were like cheetahs galloping across the flat plains. Not long after, they arrived at the mountain gate of the Azure Edge Sword Sect and stopped. They were 2 young swordsmen in their early 20s. Their eyes were clear, and they each had a sharp aura. They wore the green robes of the Azure Edge Sword Sect, and each carried a sword on their back. "Who are you 2? The 2 disciples guarding the mountain gate were shocked. They looked at them suspiciously, and after a few moments, they saluted with their swords and asked, "You don't even recognize your senior brother, how rude." One of the disciples' face darkened as he shouted unhappily, "There is only one senior brother in the Azure Edge Sword Sect, and that is senior brother Li Yi. Who are you 2? After being shouted at, the 2 disciples seemed to have been intimidated. Their faces changed, and they reacted by shouting back at him, "I am Luo Yufeng, the former senior brother." The other of the 2 smiled and said, "We are both disciples of the Azure Edge Sword Sect. You will know when one of you goes to report. Luo Yufeng, the former senior brother. The two disciples guarding the mountain gate thought for a while, and their faces suddenly changed. They hurriedly said, "Senior brothers, please wait for a moment. I will go report to the elder." One of the disciples turned and ran away. This was because it was not a particularly important matter, so there was no need to use a signal flare. After all, it was troublesome to make such a thing, so it was better to save as much as possible. They would only use it when a particularly important matter happened. After a period of time, a figure leaped and moved at an extremely fast speed, forming countless phantoms as he leaped and landed at the mountain gate, revealing his figure. It was a middle-aged man in his early 40s. It was Elder Luo. Elder Luo's eyes flashed like lightning, and when they fell on the faces of the two people who claimed to be disciples of the Azure Edge Sword sect, excitement and joy appeared on his face. "Yufeng, you are back, and Zhou Jin. Not bad, I haven't seen you for a year, and your cultivation has broken through to the middle stage of 10th stage. Uncle." Luo Yufeng immediately smiled and saluted with his sword. "Greetings, Elder Luo." Zhou Jin also quickly saluted with his sword. Elder Luo was Luo Tianxiong's younger brother, and Luo Yufeng was Luo Tianxiong's son. It was natural for him to call Elder Luo uncle. "Let's go, the sect master will be very happy to see you back, especially you, Yufeng. I haven't seen you for a year, and your cultivation has reached the peak of 10th stage. Yuling will also be very happy to see you." Elder Luo smiled and nodded to the two disciples guarding the mountain gate. Together with Luo Yufeng and the other two, they quickly went to the main hall. Along the way, Luo Yufeng repeatedly asked Elder Luo about the various changes in the sword sect in the past year. Elder Luo naturally answered one by one, and Zhou Jin occasionally added a sentence. The three people in this harmonious conversation quickly rushed to the main hall to see the sect master Luo Tianxiong. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 121. It was the second morning after Luo Yufeng and Zhou Jin had returned to the Qinfeng sword sect. I really didn't expect that our sect would have 6 junior brothers who have reached the early 10th stage this time. This number is more than ever before. Luo Yufeng said with a smile. He felt gratified from the bottom of his heart. He was Luo Tianxiong's son and the junior sect master of the Qinfeng sword sect in name. The more outstanding a disciple was, the more beneficial it was for the sect. "Brother, let me introduce them to you later. Among the 6 disciples who have reached the early 10th stage, one of them is the most outstanding." Luo Yuling was as happy as a little white rabbit, bouncing around happily. Her eyes were like crescent moons and her smile was like a flower. "You're talking about that junior brother called Chu Mu, right?" Luo Yufeng's eyes had a hint of a teasing smile. His face had a look of understanding, which made Luo Yuling's cheeks turn red and her eyes ripple with shyness. Luo Yufeng smiled and said, "Okay, I'd like to see what magic this Chu Mu has to open up my sister's heart." "Brother." Luo Yuling was even more embarrassed. She lightly stomped her foot and pinched her sleeves. "I'm ignoring you." "Ha ha ha ha." Luo Yufeng laughed. He hadn't experienced this feeling in a long time. In a place like the Li Province Sword Academy, his nerves were always tense and he didn't dare to relax in the slightest. But after returning to the Qinfeng sword sect, especially after seeing his family, he was completely relaxed. Suddenly, there was a kind of comfort that came from the bottom of his heart. Luo Yufeng missed it very much. Suddenly, a trace of sadness appeared in Luo Yuling's eyes, but it quickly disappeared because she remembered Chu Mu's attitude towards her. He was neither cold nor warm, just like the others. "Junior sister, what's wrong? Did that Chu Mu bully you?" Zhou Jin, who had been watching from the side, noticed Luo Yuling's sadness and quickly asked. He also saw Luo Yuling as a younger sister. How could he, as a brother, let his sister be wronged? No, Luo Yuling said quickly. Luo Yufeng and Zhou Jin looked at each other. Luo Yufeng didn't say anything, but Zhou Jin's eyes flashed with a sneer. Chu Mu. He had heard this name so many times that his ears were about to form calluses. Ever since he returned to the Qinfeng sword sect and met the sect leader, the three chancellors, and the elders, he kept hearing the name Chu Mu from them. Chu Mu's achievements were also mentioned by the sect master and the elders in an excited tone, as if they were showing off. This feeling made Zhou Jin feel very uncomfortable. In any case, when Zhou Jin had stayed in the Azure Edge sword sect a year ago, he had been the second senior brother among the many disciples. In the hearts of many disciples, his position was second only to Luo Yufeng. At that time, even the current eldest senior brother, Li Yi, and the other two would have to stop and greet him respectfully as second senior brother. In a while, we'll know what kind of person Chu Mu is. Zhou Jin sneered inwardly. If he doesn't know what's good for him, I don't mind teaching him a lesson and letting him know how to behave. Unknowingly, the three of them had arrived at the elite disciple area. The reason why the sect leader hadn't summoned Chu Mu and the others was entirely Luo Yufeng's idea. After all, the two of them had returned from the Lizhou Sword Academy because they had received a letter from the sword sect. They had specially acted as guides to bring the 10th stage junior brothers of the sword sect to the Lizhou Sword Academy to cultivate. Therefore, they had planned to unexpectedly come and see their junior brothers. Under Luo Yuling's lead, the three of them went directly to the sword training platform because Luo Yuling knew that at this time, Chu Mu would usually be practicing sword techniques at the sword training platform. When the three of them arrived at the sword training platform, they indeed saw 6 disciples practicing sword techniques there. It was Chu Mu, Xiao Qianfeng, and the others. Brother, he's Chu Mu. Luo Yuling's gaze swept over and her eyes immediately lit up. She pointed at one of them and said with a tone of joy. Following Luo Yuling's finger, Luo Yufeng and Zhou Jin both stared at one of the figures. At this time, Chu Mu had just finished practicing the cloud-shattering sword technique and was chatting with Li Yi and the others. It seems that there's nothing special about him, Luo Yufeng muttered to himself. However, he knew that some people didn't show off, but they had a deep heart and couldn't be judged by appearance. His looks are ordinary and there's nothing special about him, Zhou Jin directly said. His tone carried a bit of contempt and imperceptible hostility, causing Luo Yuling to frown slightly. At this time, Li Yi just happened to turn around and look over. His gaze swept over and landed on Luo Yufeng's face. At first, he was stunned, then a trace of excitement flashed across his face. This caused Yuan Wenhua, Wang Tingo, and Xie Chunlei to be slightly stunned. They followed his gaze and also landed on Luo Yufeng's face. Senior brother Luo. There was a slight tremor in their voices. Li Yi and the others looked even more excited. 4 junior brothers, we haven't seen each other for 2 years. Congratulations on breaking through to stage 10. Luo Yufeng walked over with a sincere smile on his face and a gentle tone. Back then, he had also taught Li Yi and the others swordsmanship, so he had a better understanding of it. Senior brother Luo, have you been staying at the Lizhou Sword Academy for the past 2 years? Li Yi and the others revealed a look of sudden realization. 2 years ago, Luo Yufeng had suddenly disappeared, but they didn't know where he went. Now that they had broken through to stage 10 and were told the location of the Lizhou Sword Academy by the sect leader, they finally reacted. That's right. I've been staying at the Lizhou Sword Academy for the past 2 years. This time, Zhou Jin and I came back to take you to the Lizhou Sword Academy to further your studies. Luo Yufeng smiled. There was no one else around, so he didn't hide anything. With Luo Yuling's talent, it was only a matter of time before she entered the Lizhou Sword Academy. In addition, her identity was special, so it was nothing to know about the Lizhou Sword Academy in advance. You're all going to the Lizhou Sword Academy, right? Zhou Jin took a step forward and shouted with a serious face. His gaze swept across Xiao Qianfeng's face and finally landed on Chu Mu's face. Who is Chu Mu? Step forward. Chu Mu frowned slightly, and the others also revealed puzzled expressions. But Chu Mu still took 2 steps forward, his brows relaxed, and his expression was indifferent. He looked straight at Zhou Jin and said indifferently, I am Chu Mu. What advice do you have for me? Advice indeed, I should give you some advice. Zhou Jin glanced at Chu Mu with a high and mighty gaze and said coldly, I heard from the sect leader and the various elders about how amazing you are and how outstanding your swordsmanship is. It can be seen that the upper echelons of the sect value you greatly and have high hopes for you. However, the Lizhou Sword Academy is not as gentle as the other sword sects. The competition there is very fierce. If you relax even a little, you will be cast aside. People who are known as geniuses can only be considered as ordinary people there. In order to prevent you from falling too far behind, I, as your senior brother, will give you some advice first. I will let you know that people need to know how to be humble. Luo Yuling's expression changed slightly. She was about to speak, but Luo Yufeng pulled her back and secretly shook his head. Luo Yufeng was a little surprised by Zhou Jin's attack, but he didn't stop him because what Zhou Jin said about the Lizhou Sword Academy was true. On the other hand, he was also very curious about Chu Mu's strength and really wanted to see it for himself. Chu Mu's cultivation was at the early 10th level, and Zhou Jin's cultivation was at the middle 10th level. Those who could enter the Lizhou Sword Academy to study were all geniuses. Therefore, with Zhou Jin's strength, even if he faced an ordinary swordsman at the late 10th level, he could fight and even win. When the sect leader and the elders talked about Chu Mu, although they appreciated and valued him very much, there were some things that they didn't say, such as how he killed Wei Hong, a 10th-level swordsman in the Qinlan virtual realm. In fact, Chu Mu was also vague. He only said that Wei Hong was injured in a battle with a high-level beast and that he was lucky to kill him. However, for a 9th phase peak to kill a 10th phase peak, even if the opponent was injured, it was still very shocking. The reason why he did not say it was to prevent too many people who knew about it from leaking out. If the Green Orchid Sword sect was driven to desperation, they would send experts to kill Chu Mu. Otherwise, Luo Yufeng would definitely stop Zhou Jin. Although Chu Mu didn't know why this person had some hostility towards him as soon as he appeared, he was not afraid. Although the aura observation technique couldn't see through his cultivation, he estimated that he was around the middle 10th level. Such a cultivation was really like an ant in his eyes. Please, Chu Mu said lightly. Li Yi and the others looked expressionless, but when they looked at Zhou Jin, there was a flash of pity in their eyes. They saw with their own eyes that Chu Mu killed Wei Hong, who was at the peak of 10th level, with a sword. Was this Zhou Jin more powerful than Wei Hong? Luo Yufeng naturally also noticed the look in Li Yi and the others' eyes and suddenly felt very surprised. While he was secretly thinking, Zhou Jin was already laughing coldly. He was angered by Chu Mu's indifferent attitude and pulled out his sword. The sword Zhou Jin used was also a fake sword. On the sword's body, there were faint traces of gold flowing, emitting a sharp light. It was a fake sword that leaned towards the metal element. With the sword in hand, Zhou Jin's expression changed, becoming serious and fierce. The aura around him reverberated, cutting through the air, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts. It was as if their bodies were surrounded by countless sword qi, stinging their skin and causing them to have no choice but to retreat. Senior brother, be careful. Luo Yuling didn't know Chu Mu's true strength, so she was very worried. Chu Mu nodded slightly. His expression was still as indifferent as before. His eyes were clear, and he just stood there straight. The aura around his body condensed into one, circulating around his body, causing Luo Yufeng and Zhou Jin's expressions to change. Because they found that the current Chu Mu, in their eyes, was flawless, without the slightest flaw. When a skilled swordsman attacked with his sword, he would always first find a flaw in his opponent, then attack with his sword. Only then would he have a chance to win. If there was no flaw, it would be difficult to attack. Acting rashly would instead expose one's own flaw and be at a disadvantage. If there's no flaw, I'll create one for you, Zhou Jin secretly shouted, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He feinted with his sword, pretending to attack Chu Mu, intending to force Chu Mu to reveal a flaw. However, Chu Mu's expression was still indifferent, and he didn't move at all. Zhou Jin suddenly felt as if he had been seen through. He felt uncomfortable from the bottom of his heart and couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. However, he didn't recklessly attack with his sword. Instead, after his anger, he entered a calm state and released a sharp and majestic aura that crushed over. This made Chu Mu a little surprised. Sure enough, he wasn't an idiot. In that case, I'll give you a flaw to attack, Chu Mu thought to himself. Although he didn't know why this person from the Sword Academy was hostile to him, the reason why Chu Mu agreed to fight with his opponent was that he wanted to see the level of swordsmanship of the Sword Academy's disciples. This would be of some help to him in understanding the Sword Academy a step earlier. The flow of his aura became slightly sluggish. The others couldn't see it, but Luo Yufeng and Zhou Jin could. While Luo Yufeng was secretly suspicious, Zhou Jin thought that Chu Mu couldn't withstand his pressure and revealed the slightest flaw. With a low shout, he stabbed out with his sword. Sword light condensed into one and turned into a golden ray that shot out in a straight line. Chu Mu's eyes lit up slightly and he secretly nodded. When an expert made a move, it was obvious whether he was skilled or not. When Zhou Jin stabbed out with his sword, Chu Mu knew that his attainments in swordsmanship were above Li Yi and the others. Only Xiao Qianfeng could compare to him. Chu Mu didn't receive it. Instead, he casually moved his feet. As he swayed back and forth, his body was like a willow branch in the wind, and Zhou Jin's sword instantly missed. Luo Yufeng's heart trembled. His pupils contracted slightly, and the light condensed into needles. He stared at Chu Mu as if he wanted to see through him. As for Zhou Jin, he was slightly shocked. The speed of his sword suddenly doubled, and he didn't hold back at all. Sword chi surged around him, and threads of faint golden light cut through the air, producing sharp whistling sounds. The disciples only felt that their eyes were filled with a faint golden light. The streaks of sharpness made them squint their eyes slightly, otherwise they would feel a piercing pain. They were all extremely shocked. If they were facing such an attack, they wouldn't be able to block even one sword, let alone so many. They would immediately be killed. However, Chu Mu seemed to be able to advance and retreat freely. His feet moved within a small range, and he easily dodged each of Zhou Jin's sword quickly and fiercely. It felt as if the two of them had discussed and practiced before. However, they could all feel the sharpness of Zhou Jin's sword. It was becoming increasingly sharper, and it was definitely not for show. Zhou Jin's face became extremely ugly. Sword chi surged and constantly surged around. He attacked with all his strength, but he couldn't do anything to Chu Mu. He almost couldn't help but use his killing move. Okay, stop! Luo Yufeng suddenly shouted, and it made Zhou Jin slightly tremble. The anger in his heart dissipated, and he quickly retreated, sheathing his sword. His face was incomparably ugly, and his heart was incomparably complicated. He was a middle 10th phase swordsman. Moreover, he wasn't an ordinary swordsman. He had gone through a year of cultivation in a place like the Lizhou Sword Academy, and had made great progress in all aspects. However, even with his cultivation and sword skills, he couldn't do anything to a newly promoted early 10th phase disciple. He didn't even have the ability to make his opponent draw his sword. Although he thought highly of himself, Zhou Jin was not a fool. He naturally saw that Chu Mu could easily avoid his sword because he could see the trajectory of his sword, and so on. As long as he counterattacked, he would definitely be able to defeat him. Haha, as expected of the genius that the headmaster and the elders have placed high hopes on. Chu Mu, you are indeed extraordinary. Luo Yufeng smiled as if he was trying to smooth things over. He looked at Chu Mu, and his eyes were full of encouragement. Luo Yuling raised her white neck and seemed to be very proud. It was as if Chu Mu was someone to her, and she felt proud from the bottom of her heart. Junior brother Chu, although you didn't draw your sword, I, Zhou Jin, am willing to admit defeat. Zhou Jin took a deep breath, and his heart gradually calmed down. His face also returned to normal. He took a step forward, and solemnly said to Chu Mu with a sword salute. Senior brother Zhou's attainments in swordsmanship are also extraordinary. Chu Mu smiled slightly. His arrogance and pride were only directed at his enemies. Zhou Jin had no enmity with him, and when he knew that he was no match for him, he was able to admit his inferiority. Such a person was worthy of the title of a swordsman. Junior brother, don't discourage me. Zhou Jin smiled bitterly, and then his eyes lit up. With junior brother's swordsmanship, once your cultivation improves, you will be able to fight for a place even in the Sword Academy. Thank you for your kind words. Chu Mu faintly smiled. His bearing was out of the ordinary, causing others to admire him even more. Junior brothers who have reached 10th stage, pack up and get ready to set off with us. We will go to the Lizhou Sword Academy to study together. Luo Yufeng smiled. Li Yi and the others were all excited. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 122. What? The two of you aren't going with us to the Li Province Sword Academy? Zhou Jin's eyes widened as he stared at Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng. His voice was like a machine gun as he said, Haven't you already decided? Moreover, your cultivations have already reached 10th stage. If you want to improve faster and become stronger, entering the Li Province Sword Academy is the most direct and correct choice. Senior brother Zhou, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng's intentions are not to enter the Li Province Sword Academy to cultivate, but rather, they are not going with us. They plan to go to the Li Province Sword Academy by themselves. Li Yi explained after Zhou Jin stopped. What? Zhou Jin's eyes widened again. You're not going with us? No, absolutely not. You have to know that the outside world is not as safe as the sword sect. The slightest accident can lead to death. Both of you have high hopes placed on you. Nothing must happen to you. Therefore, it's safer for you to travel with us. Senior brother, thank you for your kind intentions. However, I insist on my choice. Chu Mu indifferently said. His tone had an unquestionable and unshakable firmness. Although Xiao Qianfeng didn't say anything, his eyes and expression all revealed an unstoppable sharpness. Any powerful swordsman has to experience various successes and failures. Zhou Jin, there's no need to say anything more. Seeing Zhou Jin's anxious expression, Luo Yufeng interrupted with a faint smile on his face. His eyes seemed to be deep in thought as he continued, Junior brother Chu and junior brother Xiao have made their own choices. They are also very clear about their choices. Then, junior brothers, let's meet at the Li Province Sword Academy. Okay. Chu Mu replied softly. Xiao Qianfeng nodded imperceptibly. Li Yi and the others looked at Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng with envy. They secretly admired them for making such a choice. Although they were itching to make a move, they knew that it would not be an easy journey to the Li Province Sword Academy. Traveling together with Luo Yufeng and Zhou Jin was the best choice. Junior brother Chu, junior brother Xiao, let's meet again at the Li State Sword Academy. Li cupped his hands in salute and smiled. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng also returned the greeting. Let's go. As Luo Yufeng spoke, he quickly turned around and left. Zhou Jin glanced at Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he rolled his eyes and let out a light sigh before turning around and leaving as well. Li Yi and the others also put on their backpacks and brought along their 100 refined swords. They waved their hands at Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng before leaving with Luo Yufeng and the others. Luo Yuling walked behind Luo Yufeng, but she kept looking back. Sigh. Luo Yufeng naturally saw Luo Yuling's expression and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Although she had only known Chu Mu for a short period of time, she could feel that Chu Mu was a true swordsman. There was only the sword in his heart. He didn't care about romantic feelings, at least for now. No one knew what would happen in the future. But this determined that Luo Yuling's love for Chu Mu could only be one-sided. It was destined to come to a sad end. But Luo Yufeng didn't plan to say anything. He would let nature take its course. He deeply understood that only by experiencing some things, success and failure, would one be able to truly understand and grow. Senior brother. Li Wei's eyes reddened. Her clear eyes that rippled like water were filled with reluctance. Her small hand tightly grasped the backpack prepared for Chu Mu. You're already at stage 7 and can become an inner disciple of the main palace. Cultivate well in the future and strive to become an elite disciple. Chu Mu comforted. Yes, senior brother. I'll definitely work hard in my cultivation. Li Wei pursed her lips. Her small face was filled with determination. She forcefully nodded her head and passed the backpack in her hands to Chu Mu. She didn't know where Chu Mu was going. She only had a feeling that this separation might be a very long time. Perhaps it would be forever. After receiving the backpack, Chu Mu put it on his back. There was also a fake fire python sword on his back. His left hand held the fake clear wind sword and his right hand patted Li Wei's head. A trace of doting flashed in his eyes. This kind of feeling was just like how an older brother would treat his younger sister. Subsequently, under Li Wei's reluctant gaze, Chu Mu turned around and walked away. He cut off the last trace of reluctance in his heart and walked away in large strides. All that was left was a figure that was gradually walking further and further away. It filled the world and was reflected in Li Wei's pupils as if it was branded into eternity. Together with Xiao Qianfeng, they bid farewell to the sect master, the 3 monastery heads and the various elders in the main hall. After that, they left the Azure Edge Sword sect in a low-key manner. They walked out of the Azure Edge Sword sect's mountain gate and headed down the mountain. Only the sect master and the others knew about their departure. As for the other disciples, although they were very curious, they had no way of knowing. They could only secretly guess, just like every other time. Within the Green Edge Sword sect, there was a tree that was over 2 meters tall in a relatively remote area not far from the main gate of the sect. Beside it stood a petite figure dressed in snow-white robes. Her beautiful face was filled with reluctance to part. Her pair of beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at Chu Mu's departing figure. Her eyes were filled with reluctance to part. Her pure white teeth lightly bit her rosy lips, stopping the words that were about to rush out of her mouth. She waited until Chu Mu's figure disappeared from her sight. Senior brother Chu, I will also work hard to cultivate and reach the 10th stage of the Sword Chi realm as soon as possible. When that time comes, I will go to the Lizhou Sword Academy to look for you. I will boldly confide in you. Her voice was soft and gentle. A gentle mountain breeze blew gently, carrying this murmur to the distance, to the sky, to the earth, and perhaps to the ears of the person she loved. In a courtyard of the Azure Edge Sword sect. Elder, according to the news from the spies, Li Yi and the others from the Azure Edge Sword sect are leaving the mountain through the Azure Edge town. There are a total of 6 people. A disciple of the Azure Edge Sword sect saluted to Elder Yao Ri and said, among the 6 of them, there are 2 unfamiliar faces. They are suspected to be the former senior brother Luo Yufeng and second senior brother Zhou Jin. In addition, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng have teamed up and are heading in another direction. Luo Yufeng. Chu Mu. Elder Yao Ri heard and fell into deep thought. His eyes flashed with a deep light. Azure Edge Sword Sect, you are indeed very lucky this time. In the trip to the Azure Edge Void Realm, there are actually 6 disciples who have left alive. It seems that this time, at least 4 of these disciples have broken through to the early stage of the 10th stage and were taken by Luo Yufeng to the Lizhou Sword Academy to cultivate. This time, all of the disciples of the Azure Edge Sword sect died in the Azure Edge Void Realm. None of them came out alive. Otherwise, there would be people who were taken by Wei Hong to the Lizhou Sword Academy. Thinking of this, Elder Yao Ri's eyes flashed with a strong murderous intent. His whole body surged with a strong murderous intent, causing the disciple's expression to change drastically. It was as if he was in a furnace, sweating profusely, and his skin turned red. He had no choice but to retreat. Go and ask Deacon Lu to come over. Tell him that I have something important to discuss with him. Elder Yao Ri restrained his murderous intent and looked at the disciple coldly. Yes, Elder. The disciple felt as if he had been pardoned. After saluting with his sword, he hurriedly turned and left. In front of Elder Yao Ri, he was too depressed. With the talent of Li Yi and the others, even if they enter the Lizhou Sword Academy, they won't be able to make any waves. I'll write a letter to the Lizhou Sword Academy and ask the disciples in the academy to take good care of them. Elder Yao Ri seemed to be talking to himself. However, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng must die. Especially Chu Mu, he must die. He must die. There was no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. The situation at the Qingfeng Sword Sect's Sword Battle Festival had already been known by the Azure Edge Sword Sect and the Qingshui Sword Sect. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng had also entered the eyes of the upper echelons of the 2 sects and were paid more attention. It just so happens that Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng are traveling together. It seems that they haven't broken through to the 10th stage yet, so they plan to go out and gain experience. Traces of murderous intent flowed in Elder Yao Ri's eyes. He laughed coldly. My sword chi art has reached a bottleneck and is on the verge of a breakthrough. It's very unstable and not suitable for me to fight. However, it's enough to have Deacon Lu fight. They're just 2 ants in the sword chi realm. Even if they break through to the 10th stage, they won't be a match for someone in the chi transformation realm. Ha 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 ha. If the Qingfeng Sword Sect knows that Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng are dead, I wonder how exciting it will be. Yes, in order to prevent the Qingfeng Sword Sect from acting out of desperation, I have to strictly order Deacon Lu to remove all traces after killing them and not leave any evidence behind. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 123. My mind is blank, my fingers are stiff, I'm going to take a bath and sleep. Qinglan Mountain was located in a relatively remote part of Lizhou. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng left Luo Yufeng and the others and traveled together. Fortunately, they had the topographic map of the Sword Sect for them to consult. Before they left, they had already memorized the topographic map. After going down the mountain, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng did not go to Qinglan Town. Instead, they went in the direction of Qinglan Town along a remote road. Both of them carried a bag on their back. Inside the bags were naturally some things that must be used. As for the elixirs and the like, of course, they were kept in their arms. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng were both people of few words. Along the way, they used their movement techniques to leap forward. Although they didn't say anything, neither of them fell behind. Their speed was extremely fast, and they were like 2 strong gusts of wind blowing forward, causing the tender green grass on the side of the road to bend over. At the same time, from the Qinglan Sword Sect, there was also a masked figure in gray with a sword on his back. He used his body movement extremely fast, leaping up like an eagle, and went down the mountain. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng, the 2 genius disciples of the Qingfeng Sword Sect. If such disciples were placed in the Qinglan Sword Sect, it would be a blessing for the sect. But if they were placed in other sword sects, especially the Qingfeng Sword Sect, it would be a disaster for the sect. the masked man said to himself in a voice that only he could hear. In his long and narrow eyes, there was an astonishing murderous intent. These two people must be killed. With my sword chi cultivation at the beginning of the chi transformation realm, no matter how strong they are, as long as they have not broken through to the chi transformation realm, there is no way they can be my opponent. If I want to kill them, it will be a piece of cake. It was said that it was easier to go up the mountain than to go down the mountain. However, the masked man in gray was incredibly fast. The rugged Qinglan mountain did not pose the slightest hindrance to him. Instead, he used the terrain to be faster and more flexible. The two figures in the running suddenly stopped and looked at each other. From each other's clear eyes, there was a trace of seriousness in their own eyes. It was a feeling that came from the mind. They felt that there seemed to be some kind of danger coming, and the target was the two of them. A glint flashed across his eyes. Immediately, he smiled in a carefree manner and the two of them moved once again. Crisis? To be able to make them feel a sense of danger, the opponent must be very powerful or have all kinds of schemes and plot. However, he believed in the sword in his hand. With the sword in his hand, he would be able to break through all schemes and schemes. No matter how strong the enemy was, he would not be afraid. As he ran, he approached a cliff. The bottom of the cliff was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. It was as if it was shrouded in clouds all year round. It was full of mystery. Suddenly, a gust of wind whistled from behind them, causing Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng's expressions to slightly change as they subconsciously separated to the left and right. At the same time, from the middle, a figure wrapped in an incomparably strong gale swept past, blowing the sand and stones on the ground into the air, and the tender green grass was almost uprooted. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng were blown away by the wind, and they quickly retreated. Their eyes narrowed slightly, and as their pupils contracted, a trace of sharp light shot out as they stared at the figure in front of them who had stopped and turned around. A pair of long and narrow eyes that were exposed to the outside shot out a sharp light that was like the edge of a sword. They swept across Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng's faces from dozens of meters away. The sharpness of the light was very threatening, causing Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng to feel slightly suffocated. It was as if the surrounding air was being compressed, causing them to feel oppressed. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng, that's the two of you. Go to hell. A strange cackle rang out, and the voice was deliberately lowered. A trace of playfulness appeared in the long and narrow eyes of the gray-clothed masked man. In an instant, he raised his right hand and grabbed the hilt of his sword with lightning speed. An extremely ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other rang out, causing the air to vibrate. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng only felt their vision blur for a moment. Immediately, an incomparably fierce and scorching aura spread out like a torrent of flames. From afar, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng felt as if they were being roasted and suffocated. It was as if a raging furnace had suddenly appeared in front of them. Following that, they each saw a fiery red sword aura that seemed to tear apart the world in front of their eyes as it slashed towards them at high speed. This fiery red sword aura was incomparably dense, as if it was formed by the compression of two flames. It filled their eyes and nothing else could be seen. In an instant, an intense and fatal sense of danger came from their hearts. Their brains felt as if they were about to explode. The sword aura within their dantian crazily surged out of their meridians like a torrent that had broken through a dam. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng could clearly feel that their meridians were about to burst. Their eyes widened, and their pupils contracted in an instant. Without holding anything back, they let out a low roar as their throats slightly squirmed. Their feet forcefully stomped on the ground, and the sword aura violently shot out, causing the ground to shatter and green grass to fly everywhere. The two figures instantly transformed into two auroras and shot out in different directions. Two fiery red sword auras shot past them by a hair's breadth. The incomparably intense heat felt as if it was going to burn the two of them into ashes. Two loud bangs rang out as the two fiery red sword auras bombarded the ground in the distance. They immediately exploded, and countless amounts of soil were charred black. The shockingly high temperature shot out in all directions like bullet. Along the way, two clear scorched marks could be seen on the ground. Everywhere they passed, the vibrant green grass would wither and shatter. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng paused their bodies in a somewhat sorry state. They threw their bags to the side and leaned forward slightly. Their right hand gripped the hilt of their sword, and their eyes emitted an incomparably sharp light that pierced through the air. They stared at the gray-clothed masked man from afar with incomparable seriousness. Qi Transformation Realm. That's right, the power of those two fiery red sword auras was incomparably tyrannical. Once they were hit, even if they didn't die, they would be injured. That was something that only Xiantian sword auras could do. And to be able to grasp Xiantian sword auras, one had to be at least a Qi Transformation Realm expert. Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng's hearts were incomparably serious. At the same time, a trace of excitement and agitation slowly grew in the depths of their hearts, gradually bursting forth. In essence, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng were actually the same kind of people. They were born for the sword, crazy for the sword, and crazy for the sword. It was just that the way they displayed it was somewhat different. The expression in their eyes changed little by little. Traces of madness gradually appeared in their eyes. You actually dodged. The two of you do have some ability. A trace of astonishment appeared in the gray-clothed masked man's long and narrow eyes. He then coldly laughed. However, in front of me, you are like ants. Obediently accept the arrival of death. Resistance will only make you suffer more. Before the gray-clothed masked man finished speaking, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng's feet fiercely stomped on the ground. Countless amounts of dirt flew up, and two holes appeared in the ground. With a whoosh, two figures, one on the left and one on the right, shot towards the gray-clothed masked man, and the surrounding scenery rapidly receded. A clanging sound rang out, as if divine metals from outer space collided. It was ear-piercing and sharp. A trace of light green and a trace of light gold condensed into a line, transforming into two aurora-like rays of light that carried an incomparably strong killing intent. One from above and one from below, slashed towards the gray-clothed masked man. Although they had never worked together before, at this moment, the two of them had an extremely great tacit understanding. They completely sealed off the gray-clothed masked man's advance and retreat. Moreover, their sword auras had condensed into a sharp edge. This was because they both knew that with their initial 10th phase sword auras, they simply couldn't pose any threat to a Qi Transformation Realm expert. Only the sharp edge of a fake sword could cause damage to a Qi Transformation Realm expert's Xiantian sword aura. Two ants. How interesting. You actually dared to attack me. A trace of astonishment flashed through the gray-clothed masked man's long and narrow eyes. Soon after, it turned into a playful expression. With two swishing sounds, he once again slashed out two streaks of fiery red sword aura. However, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng, who were charging at high speed, suddenly twisted their bodies in a strange manner. Not only did they avoid the gray-clothed masked man's sword aura, they also strangely accelerated their approach and attacked with their two swords. The gray-clothed masked man's sword attack was extremely fast, as if it had split into two sword shadows. It sealed off Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng's attacks from above and below, producing ear-piercing clanging sounds. Under the powerful force, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng only felt the fake swords in their hands tremble. Their palms went numb, and their fake swords almost flew out of their hand. Chu Mu used a technique to disperse the force of the rebound. Swish, swish, swish. His sword stabbed out like a cool breeze. On the other hand, Xiao Qianfeng turned his body to disperse the force of the rebound. He turned around and slashed out with an extremely swift and fierce slash. The gray-clothed masked man's heart trembled. He completely didn't expect that Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng would actually have this kind of reaction. He hurriedly struck out with his sword and blocked Xiao Qianfeng's sword. Then, he immediately turned around and blocked Chu Mu's sword. But who was Chu Mu? He was at the Sword Master realm. How could his sword be so easy to block? It seemed simple, but there was actually a profound principle behind it. After a few strikes, the expression of the gray-clothed masked man suddenly changed. He actually couldn't catch the trajectory of Chu Mu's sword. He could only rely on his higher cultivation and faster speed to forcefully block Chu Mu's sword. The clanging sounds were unceasing. Chu Mu's sword seemed to have come alive. It was full of spirituality. Sword after sword stabbed, slashed, cut, and slashed. Every strike was aimed at the gray-clothed masked man's vital points, forcing him into a passive position to block Chu Mu's sword. Behind him, Xiao Qianfeng's sword arrived in a timely manner, carrying an intense sharpness and killing intent. The gray-clothed masked man only felt a chill on his back. He hurriedly blocked Chu Mu's sword with his sword and quickly retreated. I've long heard that Chu Mu's sword skills are extraordinary. Today, I've personally experienced it, and it's indeed true. His sword skills are actually above mine. The gray-clothed masked man thought to himself as he retreated. The killing intent in his heart became even stronger. This person must die. I definitely can't let him grow. Kill! Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng glanced at each other. Their eyes flashed with killing intent. Like an arrow leaving the bowstring, they once again charged forward with endless sharpness and killing intent. Damned ants. So what if your sword skills are good? In front of an absolute difference in sword chi cultivation, you're nothing. When the gray-clothed masked man saw that Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng didn't know what was good for them, he immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. With a loud shout, sword chi surged from his entire body. His body seemed to have turned into a furnace, releasing a terrifying scorching aura that fluctuated in all directions. The surrounding air was stirred up, and the spiritual energy within a 10-meter radius became incomparably hot. A fiery red color quickly spread. The gray-clothed masked man stood in the middle of the fiery red spiritual energy, as if he was burning. The sword in his hand also seemed to have turned into flowing flames. As he slowly waved his right hand, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng felt as if their bodies were ignited. Their blood boiled and their expressions changed greatly. An extremely strong sense of danger arose spontaneously. The two of them hurriedly stopped their charging bodies. The surging sword chi fiercely struck the ground in front of them, and their bodies rapidly retreated. Die! The gray-clothed masked man let out an explosive roar full of killing intent. The sword in his hand fiercely slashed down through the air. In an instant, countless fiery red rays transformed into rays of sword aura that covered the sky and covered the earth as they slashed down. Like a flood of magma, they directly submerged Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng's bodies. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 124. Loud rumbling sounds rolled out as the fiery red sword chi formed into a terrifying wave, emitting an incomparably high temperature. The tender green grass on the ground completely lost its moisture and quickly dried up. Then, like dry grass that had been burned by fire, it turned into ashes. The instant the terrifying fiery red sword chi wave surged over, Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng both felt the air around them become incomparably hot. Moreover, it was compressed, making it difficult for them to move and dodge for a moment. Their expressions changed greatly as a fatal sense of danger suddenly exploded in their minds. Their scalps went numb, and the pores on their bodies opened up. A trembling feeling that came from the depths of their hearts gushed out like spring water, causing their bodies to tremble uncontrollably. Terrifying, extremely terrifying. The fiery innate sword chi wave formed by the fiery innate sword chi seemed as if it could even burn the space. A bright red color was reflected in Chu Mu and Xiao Qianfeng's trembling eyes. It was as if the entire world had been filled with red. The sword chi in their dantian seemed to have exploded, instantly rushing out of their dantian and attacking their meridians. It rushed out of every pore and condensed around their bodies, forming an armor to protect them. Faint golden sword qi revolved around Xiao Qianfeng's body. Strands of sword qi circulated around Xiao Qianfeng's body. It was filled with a strange and magnificent color, and it carried an endless sharpness. In an instant, it collided with the fiery red sword qi that was violently rushing towards him. With a cracking sound, Xiao Qianfeng's incomparably pure metal sword qi was unable to withstand the innate sword qi. It was instantly shattered, and the terrifying fiery innate sword qi directly bombarded Xiao Qianfeng's body. Xiao Qianfeng's body flew back dozens of meters in an instant. As for Chu Mu, his sword aura armor was instantly shattered by the fire-type innate sword qi. The power of this innate sword qi was something that even the upper elemental sword qi he cultivated from his yellow-rank upper elemental sword qi technique could not compare. Unless Chu Mu used his Xiantian sword qi to block it, but there was only one Xiantian sword qi. Once it was consumed, it would take several days to condense it again. In an instant, Chu Mu manipulated the sword qi and gathered them in front of him, colliding with the raging fire element Xiantian sword qi. Once again, the Xiantian sword qi was shattered, and heavily smashed onto Chu Mu's body, colliding with the invisible protective sword qi. Chu Mu's body was also sent flying dozens of meters away by the violent impact of the fire elemental Xiantian sword qi. He landed on the ground and rolled a few times before the flames on his clothes were extinguished. However, more than half of his cyan gown had been burned, and his face was covered in dirt, making him look extremely miserable. More than half of Xiao Qianfeng's azure robe had been burned away. His hair was curled up and he lay motionless on the ground. Wisps of azure smoke rose from his body, and he looked as if he had been roasted. However, the fake sword was tightly gripped in his hand, as if it was inseparable from his life. Wherever the Xiantian sword qi passed, it left behind a trail of ash. The charred ground emitted wisps of smoke. Humph, ants will always be ants. So what if your sword skills are good? The masked man in gray exhaled and coldly muttered to himself. In the face of an absolute difference in sword qi cultivation, no matter how good your sword skills are, you still won't be able to unleash their full power. 2 mere early 10th stage martial artists want to fight against me? They're simply dreaming. This violent strike of Xiantian sword qi had consumed a lot of his Xiantian sword qi, but it was still worth it to kill 2 geniuses. They're both using fake swords. If I bring them back to the sword sect and turn them in, I'll be able to obtain a sea of contribution points. In addition, Elder Glorious Sun has promised to teach me a high-level sword skill after killing the 2 of them. The masked man in gray was delighted. Although he was an expert at the beginning of the Qi transformation realm, the high-level swordsmanship he had mastered was only an incomplete high-level swordsmanship. There was nothing he could do about it. This was generally the case in low-grade sword sections. Therefore, when Elder Glorious Sun asked him to take action and promised to teach him a complete high-level sword skill, he didn't hesitate at all and immediately agreed. Coming back to his senses, the masked man in gray first looked at Xiao Qianfeng, then looked at Chu Mu. In a flash, he dashed towards Chu Mu. The sword in his hand flickered with a faint red light. I'll chop off your heads and bring them back to report on my mission. The masked man in gray raised his sword and chopped down. Suddenly, his vision blurred and his sword missed. A trace of coldness and sharpness abruptly came from behind, causing the masked man in gray's expression to change greatly. Xiantian's sword qi surged to form an armor as he hurriedly turned around and swept up a torrent of flames. The clanging sound was incomparably loud and ear-piercing. As the sparks scattered, a figure was sent flying backwards. The figure repeatedly waved his long sword and several sword qi slashed through the air. He actually didn't die. The masked man in gray's expression became incomparably gloomy. He shattered the sword qi with a single strike. One could imagine how unsightly his expression must be. His heart also felt a wave of lingering fear. He originally thought that he had killed Chu Mu, but he didn't expect that not only did he not die, he even wanted to take the opportunity to attack him. While the masked man in gray was angry and fearful, he also felt a trace of fear. An early 10th phase swordsman not only didn't die after being directly attacked by a Qi transformation realm Xiantian sword Qi, but also had the strength to counterattack. This was unheard of. Killing intent surged, filling his chest and almost exploding. The masked man in gray drew his sword, and a terrifying Xiantian sword Qi once again shot out. Chu Mu completely displayed 30% of his wind conception and integrated it into his wandering in the wind movement. His body almost floated up, like a willow branch drifting erratically, avoiding the attack of the masked man in gray's Xiantian sword Qi. The gray-clothed masked man waved his sleeve, and his entire body leapt into the air. It was as if he had ascended the 9 heavens, and he leapt 20 meters into the air. Looking down from above, his long and narrow eyes let out a terrifying killing intent as he stared at Chu Mu on the ground. His body turned and his sleeves waved, creating a strong Qi flow that produced a muffled sound of thunder. His whole body dropped down, and with a sword in front of him, he shot out like an arrow, tearing through the air. Carrying a fiery red color like a rainbow, he shot towards Chu Mu. An extremely terrifying fiery aura pressed down, and the surrounding temperature rose again. It became boiling hot, almost suffocating Chu Mu. Chu Mu's whole body felt like it was bound and suppressed, making it difficult for him to move. His face changed dramatically. This sword was too powerful, and he couldn't block it. Without holding anything back, Chu Mu focused his mind to 120% and mobilized all of the sword aura within 7 meters. Chu Mu felt as if his head was about to explode. The pressure around him loosened, and the sword aura 7 meters away surged and condensed into a crescent arc. It shot out and attacked the gray-clothed masked man. With a cold shout, the masked man in gray swung his sword. Fire-type innate sword Qi gathered on the pseudo-sword and flowed around it. The sword directly shattered the external sword Qi attack, while Chu Mu took this opportunity to use his movement technique to quickly escape. He was very clear about one thing, and that was even if his sword skills were far superior to his opponent's, but in front of the absolute gap in sword Qi cultivation, he was far from being his opponent's opponent. Once he got close, it would be very disadvantageous for him. Only by increasing the distance, and then finding the right time to activate his only Xiantian sword Qi and use the sky-splitting golden edge could he kill his opponent. That was his only chance, and he had to grasp it well. Otherwise, if he failed, Chu Mu wouldn't have a chance to turn the tables. Even if he wanted to escape, it would be very difficult. Even if his movement skill was better than his opponent's, under the huge gap in cultivation, he would still be on par or even surpassed. Xiao Qianfeng was still lying on the ground, motionless. Chu Mu felt that Xiao Qianfeng shouldn't be killed so easily. The masked man in gray leaped into the air, and his sword pressed down. Waves of heat surged towards Chu Mu, as if he wanted to turn him into ashes. Chu Mu quickly retreated, and the masked man in gray chased after him. Like a meteor, he fell with his back facing Xiao Qianfeng. At this moment, all of his attention was on Chu Mu, and there was only one thought in his mind: kill Chu Mu. At this moment, the finger on Xiao Qianfeng's left hand moved slightly. His aura was withdrawn, and a faint golden light gathered on his left index finger. Holding the sword in his right hand, he stood up, and his left index finger touched the body of the fake sword. Following the ridge of the sword, he quickly wiped the tip of the sword. Wherever his finger passed, the sword seemed to come alive, and there was a dazzling golden light flickering. In an instant, Xiao Qianfeng's sharpness broke through his body, as if it had shattered his sorry state. He let out a low shout and slashed with his sword. An inch of sword light flickered, and his entire body seemed to become one with the sword in his hand. The sharpness almost pierced through the clouds. Thousand-edge kill. The masked man in gray instantly felt the terrifying sharpness behind him. His expression changed greatly, and his pupils trembled. He quickly turned around and slashed his sword at Xiao Qianfeng. Xiao Qianfeng's momentum was fierce, and he used all of his strength to display the ultimate move of the endless way of the sword inheritance. Its power was extremely terrifying, and even the masked man in gray, who was at the beginning of the Qi transformation realm, felt a moment of fear. The terrifying faint golden sword light tore through the sky and collided with the masked man's fake sword. The sound of an explosion was extremely ear-piercing, and it echoed for several hundred meters. Wherever it passed, the air was shattered, and even the grass on the ground was turned into powder. It was as if the invisible sword Qi had killed it. Under the attack of the enormous power, the masked man in gray only felt a terrifying sharpness penetrating through the fake sword, and at the same time, he was startled. At the same time, he hurriedly used his innate sword Qi to block it. The faint golden sword light shattered, and it splashed out like fireworks. It was exceptionally beautiful and dazzling. A figure was also instantly sent flying, and a stream of blood sprayed into the sky. "Kill!" Xiao Qianfeng roared, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His voice echoed as he uncontrollably flew out of the cliff. Chu Mu's eyes flashed. This was the best opportunity. He instantly mobilized a strand of innate sword Qi in his dantian, moving through his meridians. It actually made Chu Mu feel a tearing pain in his meridians. Enduring the pain, he quickly transferred the strand of innate sword Qi to his arm and spread it to the fake clear wind sword. A faint white and a faint golden color intertwined. Xiao Qian waved his sword in the air, and a thin golden light that was as fine as a needle cut through the void and disappeared. The masked man in gray, who was in the middle of dispersing Xiao Qianfeng's thousand-edge strike, couldn't help but tremble. The innate sword Qi protecting his body seemed to have been cut in half and dissipated. His long and narrow eyes emitted a light of disbelief. He slowly lowered his head and looked at his waist. He saw that his clothes seemed to have been cut open by an invisible thread, and a scarlet color slowly spread out. Only then did he feel a bone-deep pain spread throughout his body, and he couldn't help but let out a blood-curdling scream. A strange sound was heard. It sounded like the ripples of water. The body of the masked man in gray split open from the waist. He fell to the ground with a bang. Blood splashed out and dyed a large area of the grassland red as he tumbled. A Qi transformation realm expert died. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 125. The smell of blood was thick and pervaded the air, spreading out continuously. Pieces of burnt ash could be seen on the ground. There was also a corpse that had been cut in half at the waist. Organs and intestines mixed with blood and body fluids flowed all over the ground. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that the cut was very smooth. In the long and narrow eyes of the masked man, there was unconcealable shock and disbelief. There were also traces of fear and unwillingness, as well as a touch of dead ash. It appeared very complicated when mixed together. Chu Mu leaped over the two halves of the corpse. Like a gust of wind, he arrived at the edge of the cliff. He paused and lowered his head to look at the bottom of the cliff. There were wisps of clouds spiraling around it. It was bottomless. Just now, Xiao Qianfeng had fallen from this place. At this moment there was no trace of him. Standing at the edge of the cliff, a gust of wind blew over and blew onto Chu Mu's body, causing his black hair to flutter in the wind and his tattered clothes to flutter. The wind caused the clouds in the cliff to fluctuate and surge, as if a terrifying enormous monster was swallowing and spitting at the bottom of the cliff. Chu Mu seemed to have become a statue. However, there were thousands of thoughts in his mind. No one had expected that his journey with Xiao Qianfeng would end like this. Xiao Qianfeng, I believe that you won't die just like this. I will wait for our next meeting. Withdrawing his gaze, the depth in his eyes was restrained. His gaze became clear again, and there was also a trace of expectation. Immediately, a burst of anger erupted in Chu Mu's heart and filled his chest. If it weren't for this masked man, he would still be traveling with Xiao Qianfeng to the Li Province Sword Academy. In a flash, Chu Mu appeared in front of the masked man's upper body like a gust of wind. Looking at the man's eyes that were filled with a complicated expression, he lightly flicked the fake clear wind sword and directly lifted the black cloth, revealing a hoarse face with sunken cheeks. This was an unfamiliar face, so Chu Mu couldn't tell anything from it. He squatted down and searched through this fellow's clothes, finding a few things. Then, he kicked the two halves of the guy's body and sent it flying down the cliff, leaving only a pool of blood. Even if someone who knew the truth saw it, they wouldn't know who left the blood behind. There were a total of 2 bottles of medicinal pills. One bottle contained great blood-clotting pills, and the other bottle contained great qi recovery pills. Other than that, there was nothing else that could prove his identity. Other than the Qinlan sword sect, I can't think of anyone else who would send a qi transformation realm expert to kill me. Chu Mu took out a few large qi recovery pills and threw them into his mouth. He put away the rest and stood up. As for the damage to his meridians caused by using the Xiantian sword qi, he could only slowly recover in the future. His eyes turned to Qinlan Mountain, as if he could see through the void with a trace of murderous intent. However, you would never have thought that this qi transformation realm cultivator would not only fail to kill me, but also die under my sword. Within 10 years, I will fulfill my promise and challenge the Qinlan sword sect. Those who deserve to die will not be spared. Chu Mu's tone had a kind of absolute determination. It was full of the sharpness of a sword, showing his unparalleled determination. He picked up the fake sword of the Qi Transformation Realm expert. In the low-grade sword sect, not every Qi Transformation Realm expert had a real sword to use. Only those at the elder level could have it. He walked to the bag he had thrown far away, opened it, and took out new clothes to change into, and tidied up a little. However, his black hair was a little curly because of the attack of the fiery red Xiantian sword qi. It looked a little strange. Fortunately, this time, I didn't go with eldest senior brother. Otherwise, there would be unnecessary deaths and injuries. However, I don't know if the Qinlan sword sect sent other Qi transformation realm experts to deal with eldest senior brother other than me and Xiao Qianfeng. With the 2 fake swords on his back and the fake clear wind sword in his left hand, he put the bag on his back again. This time, he was alone and didn't have any companions. Carrying a bit of worry for Li Yi's group, Chu Mu started walking again. After a period of time, Chu Mu left the cliff area. He walked a little further and walked into a wide road. Remote roads often seemed quiet and there were very few people walking on them. However, once he reached the main road, there were more people walking on it. Not long after Chu Mu walked onto the main road, he encountered a carriage coming from the opposite direction. It stirred up a cloud of dust as it sped away. This was an unrelated person. Chu Mu only glanced at it from afar and didn't pay it any attention. Not long after, another sound came from not far behind him. According to Chu Mu's senses, it was about a few dozen meters behind him. There were exactly 5 people. Sure enough, not long after, the sound behind him gradually became louder, indicating that the people behind him were gradually catching up. Chu Mu's ears moved slightly, and he judged the walking posture and movements of the 5 people behind him based on his listening sword. It was said that the perfected listening sword could clearly and accurately reproduce the source of the sound. However, the current Chu Mu was still unable to do this. Because he was using listening sword, Chu Mu's speed was not fast. Not long after, the 5 people surpassed Chu Mu. Chu Mu could clearly feel that their gazes stayed on him for a few breaths of time. Chu Mu could even feel that there was a sharp gaze that stayed on his hand and the fake sword on his back for the longest time. Because these 5 people were already in front of Chu Mu could naturally see them. There were 4 men and 1 woman, and they all had swords on their backs. Judging from their backs and their side profile, they were not too old nor too young. They were probably in their 20s. Through the Qi observation technique, Chu Mu also found that their sword Qi cultivation was only at the 9th stage, while some were at the 10th stage. The most powerful one, according to Chu Mu's judgment, should be at the middle of the 10th stage. It seems that they are scattered swordsmen, Chu Mu secretly said. In their 20s, they were only at the 9th or 10th stage of sword Qi cultivation. Only a group of scattered swordsmen. Otherwise, if they were disciples of a sword faction, they should not be at this level. At the same time that Chu Mu made a judgment on them, their discussion also turned to Chu Mu's side, and they whispered. That swordsman just now was so young. I guess he was only 17 or 18 years old. Well, at most 20 years old, much younger than us. But his cultivation, I used Qi observation technique and found that he was at the early 10th stage, just a little bit worse than me. What? He is so young and has the early 10th stage of sword Qi cultivation. That is much more powerful than us. It seems that he should be a disciple of a sword faction. I really envy him. A disciple of a sword faction is really extraordinary. But he actually has 3 swords on him. That is really strange. Everyone, as a 10th stage disciple of a sword faction, his identity is definitely not bad. Maybe he has some secret manuals or pills on him. And I just noticed that the swords in his hands and on his body are not ordinary sword. They seem to be 3 pseudo-swords. What? Pseudo-swords? Yes, they are pseudo-swords. I was lucky enough to see them before. He is only one person, and his cultivation is at the early 10th stage. Should we? No, a sword faction disciple is not ordinary. If we can't kill him, I am afraid that in the future, he will take revenge. Well, there is no need to say more. Some things just need to be thought about. Gradually, they went further and further away. Little did they know that their whispers were clearly transmitted to Chu Mu's ears. Fortunately, they did not make up their minds to make a move on Chu Mu. Otherwise, they would only add to the 5 dead souls under Chu Mu's sword. For Chu Mu, these 5 people were just passing by. They were unable to leave any trace in his heart. While walking, he used the listening sword to listen to the sounds coming from all around. The sound of the wind blowing, the footsteps of people walking, the sound of sand and stones being blown, the sound of leaves swaying in the wind, etc. The sounds of the whole world were intertwined with each other. In Chu Mu's ears, they were clearly separated. While walking, Chu Mu's eyes naturally closed. It was like a person who was tired to a certain extent, unable to control himself. In a split second, the world in front of his eyes disappeared under the closed eyelids, returning to darkness. It was as if everything had fallen into a deep sleep, returning to silence. After that, another exciting scene appeared. Chu Mu's ears became more sensitive. His hearing increased greatly in an instant, as if he had swept away layers of obstacles. The whole world, in another form, was displayed in Chu Mu's ears. He listened to the world. Chu Mu's footsteps unconsciously came to a stop. He stood motionless by the side of the road. His aura had completely stilled, as if he had become a statue. The wind continued to blow, causing the leaves to rustle. It blew the dust on the road into the air. It blew the grass on the side of the road up and down like waves. It blew Chu Mu's black hair and clothes, but it did not move Chu Mu's body, nor did it move Chu Mu's mind. Time passed bit by bit. The sun that was emitting warm light gradually set in the west, turning into a blazing fireball. The red afterglow scattered across the earth, leaving behind a residual heat. Chu Mu's body seemed to be covered in a layer of red gauze, but his body was nailed to the ground like a nail. His body was as straight as a sword pointing to the sky. Occasionally, people would pass by and look at Chu Mu in surprise. They pointed at him, not understanding just what was going on with Chu Mu. However, ordinary people were in awe of swordsmen. They did not dare to disturb Chu Mu. As for the swordsmen passing by, almost all of them were swordsmen. Therefore, when they used the aura observation technique to look at Chu Mu, they either could not see through Chu Mu's cultivation, or they could see that Chu Mu was at the early 10th stage. They knew that Chu Mu was definitely a disciple of some sword faction. Even if he was only a disciple of a low-grade sword faction, it was still not an existence that swordsmen like them could contend against. Therefore, in order to avoid trouble, they did not go near Chu Mu or even disturb Chu Mu. However, there were always exceptions. There were two middle-aged swordsmen with gloomy looks who came from afar. They followed the crowd's line of sight and fell on Chu Mu's body. When some of the swordsmen saw these two gloomy middle-aged swordsmen, their expressions changed. A hint of fear flashed through their eyes, and they quickly retreated. Early 10th stage cultivation? It seems that he is a disciple of some sword faction. It seems that he has entered a state of cultivation. One of them said to himself. Soon after, he sneered. It seems that he is a rookie who has just left the sword faction to gain experience. He actually entered a state of cultivation in this kind of place. He is really reckless. Boss, I will take the opportunity to kill this guy. I believe that he must have a lot of good things on him. The other person said. He turned into a sharp arrow and shot toward Chu Mu. He pulled out his sword in midair. A clanging sound rang out. The sharp sword was mixed with a snow-white sword light. It was fierce and murderous. The wind whistled. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 126. A series of exclamations rang out. This gloomy middle-aged man had the sword chi cultivation of the middle 10th phase. At this moment, he made his move. The 100 refined sword in his hand emitted an incomparably sharp killing intent that completely locked onto Chu Mu, who had his eyes closed. His sword chi surged. This sword was merciless. It had an earth-shattering power that wanted to kill Chu Mu on the spot. This caused many of the scattered swordsmen to reveal shocked expressions. If any of you dare to leak any information, be careful of your own head. The other gloomy middle-aged man revealed a cold smile full of threat and murderous intent. He looked around, and his sharp eyes swept across the faces of the scattered swordsmen around him like a viper, and he threatened. Everyone hurriedly suppressed their exclamations. Their expressions changed greatly as they continuously retreated. Some even immediately turned around and left. It seemed that these two gloomy middle-aged men had a great background. Seeing that the sword that was filled with killing intent was already close to him, and that in the next second it might pierce through his throat and cause blood to splatter, the surrounding onlookers could not help but narrow their pupils, revealing faces of shock and pity. The gloomy middle-aged swordsman who attacked already had a smile of victory on his face. He believed that in the next moment, his sword would pierce through the throat of this silly sword faction disciple. He would also hear the beautiful sound of the sword piercing through the throat. In the blink of an eye, there were even some people who could not help but close their eyes. They only felt their vision blur. The gloomy middle-aged man's sure-kill sword actually strangely missed. The air flow and various sounds brought about by the sword were all clearly felt by Chu Mu. Subconsciously, his body reacted instinctively and dodged the sword. He actually avoided it. A series of low cries sounded, filled with disbelief. The gloomy middle-aged man's face became even gloomier. This sword that he was completely confident in was actually avoided. Moreover, it was avoided by a rookie whose cultivation was lower than his. This made him extremely angry. Even though he was angry, he did not lose his mind. His sword chi surged and let out a roar. The sword rolled up a faint green color and blew out a strong wind. The power of this sword strike was even stronger than the previous one. After all, he thought that Chu Mu wouldn't be able to sense his previous attack, and that it would be easy for him to kill him. Therefore, he only used the strength of his body to swing his sword and didn't use much of his sword chi. However, after being dodged by Chu Mu, he felt embarrassed and didn't hold back his sword chi. Chu Mu frowned slightly when he sensed the other party's piercingly cold, killing intent surging towards him. However, his eyes remained closed. He was still immersed in the world of listening to the sword and had yet to awaken. However, his body reacted naturally. His right hand grabbed the hilt of the sword with lightning speed and pulled it out in an instant. A clanging sound rang out like the collision of divine metals from outer space. A faint green sword light that contained a cold and sharp killing intent swept through the air like a cool breeze brushing past one's face. This strange contradiction caused the gloomy middle-aged swordsman's expression to change. His eyes seemed to blur for a moment, and his sword seemed to have encountered some kind of invisible obstruction. It paused slightly, almost imperceptibly. This slight pause, which couldn't be detected from the outside, was enough to change the entire situation. Chu Mu's fake clear wind sword was close to the gloomy middle-aged swordsman's 100 refined sword. In the instant that the gloomy middle-aged swordsman was in a daze, Chu Mu's sword lightly touched his throat. A terrifying killing intent immediately pierced through his throat and went through his entire neck. Sheathing his sword, Chu Mu's figure once again returned to stillness, as if he had never moved. However, the gloomy middle-aged swordsman maintained his posture of thrusting out his sword, pointing directly at Chu Mu. However, he seemed to be frozen and motionless. His eyes quickly turned white and a touch of death spread across his face. There were remnants of fear and disbelief. At his throat, a scarlet color spread and blood quickly spread out. "He's dead, he's dead." Immediately, when someone saw clearly, there was a commotion. The other gloomy middle-aged swordsman's face was filled with killing intent. His gloomy face seemed to be about to drip water. One of his hands gripped the hilt of his sword, as if he wanted to grab it. The veins on the back of his hand bulged out. He gritted his teeth. His heart was filled with pain and anger at the same time. It was as if lava from a volcano was about to erupt. He wanted to immediately pull out his sword and kill the person in front of him. However, he didn't dare. In his heart, other than anger and pain, there was also fear. His cultivation was about the same as that of his brother who was killed. They were both in the middle of the 10th stage. Their swordsmanship was about the same. However, his brother was killed by a single sword strike. In other words, if he attacked, he would also be killed. Damn little bastard. No matter what sword sect you are from, you killed my brother. You must die. You must die. Letting out a beast-like roar, the gloomy middle-aged swordsman quickly turned around and ran away in large strides before Chu Mu woke up. His figure disappeared in a flash. Only a few scattered swordsmen were left looking at each other. They were unable to hide the shock in their eyes. After a few breaths of time, Chu Mu's eyes slowly opened. His eyes clearly reflected the figures around him. Chu Mu's face flashed with a hint of confusion. Soon after, when his gaze landed on the gloomy middle-aged man's face, Chu Mu thought for a moment. Only then did he understand the cause and effect. He couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Although he had just entered a special state, this special state that could only be encountered by chance and not by searching for caused his listening to sword to go from near Deshang to near Deshang. And in this state, everything in the body was handed over to instinct. It seemed that the person in front of him wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. Instead, he died under his instinctive counterattack. Regarding this, Chu Mu didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. It was normal to want to kill someone and be killed. You, come here. What exactly happened here? Even though he understood the cause and effect, he only knew that the gloomy middle-aged swordsman wanted to kill him. As for everything else, Chu Mu didn't know. The scattered swordsman who was called out trembled all over. His face paled, and he had a cowering appearance. He regretted that he didn't leave as soon as possible. Why did he stupidly stay? However, after personally witnessing such an inconceivable thing happen, he didn't have any thoughts of escaping. His voice trembled as he explained. As for Chu-Mu, he listened without saying a word. His expression didn't change in the slightest, but there was a glimmer of light in his eyes. The two of them are consecrators of White Maple City's King's Snake Gang. They both have the cultivation of the middle 10th phase. The King's Snake Gang is the largest faction in White Maple City. They are extremely powerful and domineering. Legend has it that there are many Chi transformation realm experts in their gang. This time, you killed one of them and the other escaped. He will definitely bring people to take revenge on you. The scattered swordsman's voice gradually became fluent as he explained. He hurriedly said, "The best way is for you to quickly leave here and return to the sword sect. No matter how strong the King's Snake Gang is, they won't dare to go against the sword sect." "Oh, you can leave." Chu-Mu, who understood everything, nodded slightly and said indifferently, "I advise you to immediately return to the sword sect." The scattered swordsman seemed to have forgotten his previous fear and was about to talk non-stop. However, Chu-Mu casually glanced at him. Immediately, his indifferent gaze was like a basin of ice water being poured over him. The scattered swordsman's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly shut his mouth and immediately turned to leave. Chi Transformation Realm Expert? No, to Chu-Mu, Chi Transformation Realm experts could only be considered experts. They couldn't be called experts. Especially not long ago, he had personally killed a Chi Transformation Realm swordsman. Although that was under the circumstances of him and Xiao Qianfeng working together, it allowed Chu-Mu to understand the strength of the Chi Transformation Realm. At the same time, he also had a more direct understanding of the Chi Transformation Realm. Although the current him wasn't a match for a Chi Transformation Realm swordsman one-on-one, it was not enough to make him feel fear. Perhaps returning to the Qianfeng sword sect was an extremely safe method, but that wasn't Chu-Mu's choice. A swordsman should have a sharp edge. This sharp edge was always contained within the heart and the body. This sharp edge that belonged to a swordsman had already fused into the blood, into the bone marrow, into the mind, into the will, and into the soul. It wasn't just the sharp edge of a swordsman, but also the sharp edge of a sword master. It was the overlapping sharp edge that mixed the souls of two different space-time. A true swordsman should be fearless, pressing forward with an indomitable will, cutting through all obstacles. Shrinking back would only cause the sharp edge to be damaged. In the end, it would become dull and desolate. This was a kind of decisiveness that came from knowing that there were tigers on the mountain, but still going to the tiger's mountain. It was an incomparable persistence of spirit and will. It was condensed into a sword that would rather break than yield, and neither yield nor give up. In that instant, Chu-Mu only felt that his mind was unprecedentedly clear. It was as if all the impurities had been expelled. It was as if a piece of stubborn iron had been continuously forged at high temperatures, removing the impurities within it bit by bit. As his mind was tempered and refined, Chu-Mu could feel that his soul seemed to become even more pure. It was an extremely peculiar feeling. It was as if the previous him and the soul of the original owner of this body were not complete enough. Then, in the following days, bit by bit, they constantly merged into one. Until this time, under the coercion of all kinds of pressure, the sharp edge that was contained in the heart of his body was forced out. It directly strangled the impurities on the surface of his mind, purified his soul, and promoted the two different souls to achieve a true and complete fusion. Chu-Mu suddenly felt that all the air around him seemed to have become clearer. Even if he didn't deliberately pay attention to it, he could feel the fluctuations more clearly. It was so much so that a sharp aura was being nurtured from the depths of his body. It was slowly revealing its lofty and domineering aura. This aura gradually leaked out, causing the scattered swordsmen not far away to feel oppressed and suffocated. In their eyes, Chu Mu's figure seemed to have become taller, as if he had suddenly grown to a height of 10 meters. Moreover, he exuded an incomparably sharp and domineering aura, oppressing them. It was as high as an unattainable mountain, turning into a sword mountain. Huff! Huff! The scattered swordsmen's faces turned pale. Their eyes bulged and their throats unconsciously squirmed, making strange sounds. Their limbs were weak, and their blood seemed to be about to solidify. What's more, their whole bodies were like boneless snakes, softly falling to the ground, unable to move. They foamed at the mouth and looked like they were on the verge of death. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 127. Too terrifying. The group of independent swordsmen trembled, their faces pale and their eyes full of fear. Who is he? Which sword sect is he from? He can actually suppress us to the point that we can't move with just his aura. If he wants to kill us, wouldn't he be able to do it in the blink of an eye? I'm guessing that he's at least a disciple of a middle-grade sword sect, or possibly a disciple of a high-grade sword sect. If he's a disciple of a low-grade sword sect, he definitely wouldn't have such an aura. The independent swordsmen all breathed a sigh of relief as they stared at Chu Mu's departing figure. They all guessed the shock and fear in their hearts were still intense. After several months, Listening Sword has finally reached Deshang. Unfortunately, it's extremely difficult to reach perfection. After leaving, Chu Mu maintained a steady pace as he moved forward. According to his understanding, there was a city on the right in front of him. It was White Maple City. However, Chu Mu had no intention of entering the city. He wanted to go all the way to the Lizho Sword Academy. After several months of comprehension, Half-Step Sword Force has finally reached perfection under the pressure of the Qi transformation stage. It's only a fine line away from entry. In addition, there's also external Sword Qi. With the complete fusion of the soul, the range of control has also reached 8 meters. At this time, the sun was setting in the west. Because it was early spring, night came quickly and it was soon dark. Chu Mu hurried on for a while. The night was dark and the stars filled the sky. He stopped beside a forest and casually glanced at it. He leaped up and used his movement technique to land on a thick tree trunk as if he was in the sky. He put down his bag, took out some dry rations and a water bottle, and ate just like that. These things were all prepared by Li Wei and were enough to last him for several days. Before he finished eating, Chu Mu basically didn't need to enter the city to replenish his rations. After finishing the rations, Chu Mu leaned against a tree trunk and closed his eyes to rest. He planned to stay here for the night and continue his journey as soon as the sun rose. At this moment, in the distance, a flame suddenly flickered and light footsteps could be heard, causing Chu Mu's ears to twitch. His eyes abruptly opened and emitted a sharp light that shot into the void and forced the darkness to retreat as he stared straight ahead. In their line of sight, through the sparse leaves and in the dark night, they could see many flickering flames flying towards them. That was the light from the burning torches, and with the help of that light, they could vaguely see some figures flickering. His speed is very fast. He should be using a movement skill to come here. Could it be? Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a bright light. Then, he restrained it and made a guess. The sword Qi in his dantian was mobilized and slowly flowed in his meridians. His right index finger subconsciously flicked gently, and the air seemed to have become the strings of a zither. Quick, quick, quick. That damned little bastard shouldn't have gone far. Quickly find him and kill him. He has a fake sword on him and must have other treasures. A hurried voice full of murderous intent sounded. It was sharp and tore through the darkness. Sure enough, it's the King's Snake Gang. Chu Mu was completely sure. A trace of gloominess flashed in his eyes. The flicking finger of his right hand suddenly stopped, and the breath of his whole body was restrained. His whole person seemed to be integrated with the tree. Previously, I used the Xian Tian sword chi to kill the chi-forming swordsmen of the Qinglan sword sect, but because the Xian Tian sword chi was too fierce and overbearing, it caused damage to my meridians. Now, I can only use 50% of my sword chi cultivation, otherwise it will worsen the damage to my meridians. Deep in thought, Chu Mu made a decision. At the same time, the shining fire was approaching, flashing under the trunk. Chu Mu glanced over and found that there were a total of dozens of figures. More than a dozen figures exuded a breath fluctuation that was at least at the peak of the 9th stage, and half of them had reached the 10th stage. The other dozens of people were all at the 8th or 7th stage of cultivation, presumably at the level of the gang members. Although it was only a glimpse, such a lineup made Chu Mu's heart tremble slightly. Perhaps in his heyday, he could deal with one or two of them and kill them one by one. But now, he could only use 50% of his cultivation, which was greatly reduced. Even if he could kill all of them in the end, he estimated that he would suffer some injuries, or even die if he was not careful. After a while, the fire quickly went away. Chu Mu breathed a sigh of relief, but he did not relax his vigilance and still restrained his breath. Sure enough, not long after, there were actually more than 20 figures that quickly returned in the dark night. They did not make a sound, nor did they use torches. But Chu Mu looked at the sword de Shang. This kind of darkness, which would affect a normal 10th stage sword practitioner, did not hinder him in the slightest, as if it was daytime. I can't find him. This guy, could it be that he can fly? The 20 or so people stopped by the tree under Chu Mu and discussed in low voices. Strange, according to logic, an early 10th stage sword practitioner, even if he used all his strength to rush back, would not just disappear without a trace. This voice carried a bit of doubt. Little did they know, the person they were talking about was right above them. As long as they looked up and carefully looked, they might be able to find him. This damned little bastard, no matter what, we have to find him. Not only did he kill my little brother, he has an irreconcilable enmity with me. He also has 3 fake swords on him and maybe other treasures. A voice that was gnashing teeth and full of hatred shouted in a low voice. What? 3 fake swords? Are you sure it's 3 and not 1? A hurried and shocked voice suddenly shouted, shaking the darkness. Yes, it's 3 fake swords. This gloomy middle-aged man, who was anxious to find Chu Mu and kill him, braced himself and said in a certain tone. In fact, he could only be sure that the sword in Chu Mu's hand was a fake sword. As for the 2 swords on his back, it was hard to say whether they were fake swords or not. But since he had already blurted it out, he could only brace himself and continue lying. The value of a fake sword was very high, and the value of 3 fake swords was even higher. Good, even if there are no other treasures, just the 3 fake swords are a great harvest. The shout from before carried traces of excitement. As a high-ranking member of the King Snake Gang, he naturally knew that even the powerful Chi transformation stage swordsmen in the gang used fake sword. As for the 10th stage swordsmen, most of them only used 100 refinement swords. Of course, that was because the 100 refined swords had been strengthened. They were tougher and more durable than normal 100 refined swords. But they were still incomparable to fake swords. In my opinion, the night is dark and not suitable for tracking. Why don't we gather our men here and wait until daybreak to distinguish the various traces and track him down? Another voice sounded, with a hint of calmness. Executive Lee's tracking techniques are famous in White Maple City. Good, then we'll follow Executive Lee's suggestion. Chu Mu frowned slightly. With the help of the night, he could indeed hide from the pursuit of these people by restraining his aura. But once daybreak, without the cover of the night, he would be easily discovered. At that time, once the dozens of people gathered to form an encirclement, he would have to pay a heavy price to break out. I can only take this opportunity to leave before they completely gather. I can use the night to escape. Chumu thought to himself. His aura was still restrained, but the upper origin sword chi in his body was slowly circulating. The Xiantian sword chi in the center of his dantian was also naturally condensing. However, since there are people who specialize in tracking, I should first kill them. Otherwise, even if I escape from the encirclement, I will be pursued again. Chumu thought to himself. His right hand slowly grasped the hilt of the fake clear wind sword, but he did not pull it out. Chumu's killing intent was also restrained like his aura, not leaking out in the slightest. His sharpness were constantly brewing in his body and mind, trying to catch them off guard and kill them in one strike. Furthermore, he had to think of all sorts of escape routes. He constantly adjusted his mind, chi, and spirit to the best state. His mind and body synchronized, the sharpness condensed into the shape of a sword. In an instant, Chumu seemed to have merged with the sword in his hand. His body also became like a huge sword, releasing a terrifying aura. Sharpness, majesty, vastness, and tyranny. It was like a tall mountain, like a turbulent sea, rolling over and crushing everything, shaking the void. In an instant, the 20 or so people under the tree only felt a heavenly might descend, crushing their bodies. They were unable to move. It was as if their blood had frozen, the air was still, and they were unable to breathe. Their bodies and limbs were suppressed, and they felt powerless. Immediately after, a cold light tore through the darkness, piercing through the sky like lightning. It was like a rainbow slashing over. The sharp killing intent condensed into a line, causing people's skin to feel a piercing pain, as if it was being torn apart. Their mouths were wide open, but they were unable to make any sound. Their eyes were filled with fear. This extremely sharp sword light filled their eyes, and the surrounding darkness completely retreated. Taking them by surprise, Chumu first released his sword aura to intimidate everyone, then he used his thunderous sword attack. In an instant, he was like an arrow leaving the bow as he flew down from the tree. The killing intent on the fake clear wind sword was so condensed that it almost became solid. Without any obstruction, Chumu's sword slashed across the neck of the consecratorly. Borrowing the force of the attack, he turned around in midair and slashed his sword again. The cold and sharp sword once again slashed across the necks of 5 swordsmen. Shortly after, he heavily stomped on the head of one of the swordsmen. With a cracking sound, the neck of the swordsman was directly broken. Chumu once again transformed into an arrow leaving the bow and shot up the tree trunk. He fully used the wandering in the wind movement technique and quickly flew into the distance. He escaped into the small forest and used the tree trunk to get away. It wasn't until Chumu was far away and his figure disappeared that the remaining people finally reacted. They were instantly furious. Chase. Chase him immediately. No matter what, we have to catch this damned bastard and punish him with 100 swords. A flustered and exasperated voice was filled with killing intent and anger as he roared. However, they found that their bodies were still weak. They barely managed to rush forward a few steps and almost fell. They had no choice but to stop and rest. Damned bastard, he was hiding in the tree and eavesdropping on our conversation. He even dared to kill so many of us. If we don't catch him, pull out his tendons, and skin him alive, it will be difficult to resolve the hatred in my heart. It's night right now, so he definitely can't run far. You guys, immediately return to the gang and mobilize more people. The rest of you, gather up and chase after him with me. No matter what, we can't let this little bastard go. The swordsmen that Chumu had just killed were all 9th and 10th phase swordsmen. There were 6 of them in total. This kind of loss was not small for the King's Snake Gang. At least in the past 10 years, the King's Snake Gang had not suffered such a loss. Therefore, between the King's Snake Gang and Chumu, it was not just a simple conflict of interests, but a clear hatred. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. calm to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 128. A few months ago, Chu Mu's wind concept had reached 30%. A few months later, although he did not break through to 40%, his comprehension of the wind concept had improved. At this time, he fully exerted 30% of the wind concept and integrated it into the wind travel movement. Chu Mu's speed was extremely fast, like a ghost under the night sky. Desheng's sword could ignore such a deep night, and in his eyes, it was as if it was daytime. Many trees seemed to rush at him. Not only did they not cause any obstruction to Chu Mu, but they also became his leverage, making him escape faster. Using a sword aura that nears the beginner level to oppress, and then using a thunderous slash. Unfortunately, if it wasn't for the fact that the movement of the sword aura reached the limit of my damaged meridians, I could have killed even more people. While using his movement technique to quickly leave, Chu Mu thought to himself. He originally expected that after his meridians were injured, his sword chi cultivation would be limited by 50%, but when he really started to fight, he found that the limit was as much as 60%. The sword chi transport that killed the 5 people made his meridians feel a stabbing pain. If it was transported again, it was bound to make the injured meridians more difficult to recover. The people of the King Snake Gang will certainly not give up. I'll let my meridians recover as I go. Unfortunately, the Great Recovery Pill and the Great Hemostasis Pill have no effect on the injury of the meridians. While secretly thinking, Chu Mu had already gone deep into the woods. The range of the woods was not large, so there were no fierce beasts living inside. Not long after, Chu Mu had already crossed the whole forest, and in front of him was a mountain. Recalling the topographic map that he had seen before leaving the Sword faction, Chu Mu knew that this mountain was called White Maple Mountain, and that was how White Maple City got its name. In terms of height, White Maple Mountain was not as high as Qinglan Mountain, but it was wider. However, the spirit chi was obviously not as abundant as Qinglan Mountain. Therefore, the ferocious beasts that lived on White Maple Mountain could not compare to the ferocious beasts of Qinglan Mountain in terms of both quantity and strength. Similarly, there were no sword sects in White Maple Mountain. The main forces were concentrated in White Maple City. After all, White Maple Mountain was not far from White Maple City. Chu Mu remembered that if he crossed the White Maple Mountain, he would be even closer to the Li Province. If he went around it, he would have to travel even further. He immediately decided to cross the White Maple Mountain. Firstly, it would shorten the time, and secondly, it would be easier to avoid the pursuit of the King Snake Gang. After all, there were quite a few experts in the Chi transformation realm in the King Snake Gang. Once they took action, Chu Mu alone would not be a match for them. In the end, he still needed to rely on his cultivation and his unfathomable swordsmanship in order to be invincible. Otherwise, he would still have to restrain himself when he needed to restrain himself. Taking advantage of the night, Chu Mu quickly flew towards White Maple Mountain. The rugged mountain rocks were not an obstacle to Chu Mu. Naturally, he also tried his best to avoid leaving any traces. However, he had not studied tracking and anti-tracking techniques, so it was inevitable that he would leave some traces. However, Chu Mu did not care about this. What he cared about was the pursuit of the swordsman in the Chi transformation realm. As for those below the Chi transformation realm, even if they were half-step to the Chi transformation realm, Chu Mu was confident that he could escape unscathed even if he was no match for them. I hope the people of the King Snake Gang know what's good for them. If they chase after me, then there will be more dead souls under my sword. Chu Mu ran all the way until he was halfway up the mountain in one breath. At this time, it was already the second half of the night. Chu Mu scanned his surroundings and found a huge rock that was away from the wind. He sat down cross-legged and did not sleep. Instead, he began to cultivate the Shang Yuan Sword Qi incantation. Cultivating the Sword Qi incantation was a process that consumed one's mental strength. The higher the grade of the sword qi incantation, the purer the sword qi cultivated. Therefore, one's mental strength had to be even more concentrated when cultivating the sword qi. However, at the same time, this was also a process of tempering one's mental strength and mental strength. Although the effects were not obvious each time and were almost undetectable, after many years, the effects would gradually become obvious. Generally speaking, every time he cultivated, he would consume a lot of his spiritual will. However, Chu Mu was different from normal swordsmen. His soul had gone through the complete fusion before and had become even stronger and purer. His mind was full and his willpower was powerful. This kind of consumption, as long as it wasn't continuous for a few days and nights, basically wouldn't make him feel tired. Because his meridians had not recovered from the injury, Chu Mu deliberately slowed down the speed of cultivating the Shangyuan sword qi. Time passed slowly as the Shangyuan sword qi circulated. In White Maple City, the King's Snake Gang was brightly lit. A large number of people moved out, attracting the attention of other forces in the city and secretly investigating. The sky was slightly bright. Chu Mu woke up from his cultivation. He opened his eyes that were as clear as water. There were traces of light flowing in them, but they were soon restrained. He opened his mouth slightly and exhaled a mouthful of white turbid breath. It condensed into a flying sword and shot out more than 2 meters. It hit the ground and seemed to shatter it. However, there was also a small hole in the ground. It was said that when a swordsman's sword qi cultivation reached a certain level, a casual breath could penetrate a mountain rock. It was very terrifying. Looking down the mountain, there was no movement. This meant that the King's Snake Gang had either given up or had not caught up. Thinking about it, it should be the second possibility. Chu Mu did not plan to stay any longer. He got up and used his movement technique, flying towards the top of White Maple Mountain. 2 hours later, Chu Mu had already reached the top of the mountain. At this moment, the sun shone brightly, covering the entire mountain in a layer of light golden-red gauze. It was dazzling and gorgeous. Standing at the top of the mountain, there was a heroic feeling of looking down on all the other mountains. Chu Mu only felt that his mind seemed to have become infinitely distant, piercing through the clouds and ignoring all obstacles. Suddenly, he felt 2 unusual auras. They were very obscure. If it were not for the fact that Chu Mu seemed to have merged with the world at that moment, he would not have sensed them at all. Following his senses, Chu Mu looked in a certain direction. After a moment of thought, he used his movement technique and quickly headed in that direction. He was quickly heading towards the other side of the White Maple Mountain. It was the same idea as Chu Mu when he crossed the White Maple Mountain. After flying for a while, he entered a dense forest. The feeling of the aura was faintly discernible, but it was much clearer than before. He suddenly stopped and his entire body went from extreme movement to extreme stillness. He stopped on a meter-tall green rock and looked ahead. Chu Mu's gaze became extremely sharp. In his eyes, there were 2 people dozens of meters ahead. The surrounding ground was filled with countless cracks. The shortest one was 10 meters long, and the longest one was 100 meters long. It was a shocking sight. One of them was wearing a silver robe that was torn and tattered. His hair was disheveled and he was in a sorry state. He was half lying on a half-meter-tall green rock. He wore a bracelet on his left hand which hung down powerlessly. His right hand was holding a silver-white sword with great effort. The other person was facing the silver-clothed person from a distance of 20 meters. He was lying on the ground, wearing a black robe. His hair was also disheveled. His left hand was also holding onto the ground with great effort, as if he wanted to get up. His right hand was also holding onto a pitch-black sword with great effort. When Chu Mu's gaze fell on the silver and pitch-black swords, his pupils unconsciously shrank to the size of needles. His heart was in turmoil. The silver sword was a bit thinner than normal swords, while the pitch-black sword was a bit narrower than normal swords. These are definitely swords. A voice roared in Chu Mu's heart. Then, Chu Mu understood even more clearly. A true sword could only be used by a swordsman who was at least in the Qi transformation realm. In other words, although the silver-clothed person and the black-clothed person looked like they were in their 20s or 30s, they were at least Qi transformation realm swordsmen. As for what level they were in, it was impossible to know. The silver-clothed person and the black-clothed person were not dead. Chu Mu's appearance had attracted their attention. They immediately turned their heads and their gazes fell on Chu Mu. The two people's eyes were incomparably fierce. When they fell on Chu Mu's face, Chu Mu immediately felt waves of piercing pain. His mental remembrance was also shaken, and his body uncontrollably swayed slightly. The silver-clothed person's sharp gaze contained a kind of transcendence that could see through everything. It was as if nothing could escape his calculations. The black-clothed person's sharp gaze contained a kind of bloody darkness. It was incomparably evil and chilling. In an instant, Chu Mu became extremely vigilant. Sword Qi surged out, and the sword Qi around him fluctuated slightly. If there was even the slightest bit of danger, he would attack with all his strength. However, the silver-clothed person and the black-clothed person only looked at Chu Mu. They did not move at all, as if they were too heavily injured. Chu Mu secretly let out a sigh of relief, but he still remained on high alert. "Kid, hurry up and kill this Zhugeming. There will be plenty of benefits for you." The black-clothed person was the first to speak. His voice was somewhat weak, but it was abnormally ruthless. His tone also carried a forceful command, as if Chu Mu was his subordinate. However, the silver-clothed person's expression did not change. He looked at Chu Mu as if he was confident. Although he was somewhat weak, he spoke neither slowly nor quickly. "Little brother, this person is a member of the Bloodsword Tower. His hands are stained with blood, and he has committed countless crimes. He has even cruelly killed thousands of civilians. Even the heavens will not tolerate this. Now that he is heavily injured, he is unable to fight back at all. This is the best time to kill him. Little brother, please do it and eliminate all evil." Chu Mu did not reply. Instead, he looked at the silver-clothed person a few times, and then at the black-clothed person a few times. In his heart, he had already made a judgment. His sword observation technique was nearing completion, and observing a sword was like observing a person. Although he could not see through his opponent's cultivation, he could roughly see through his opponent's character. Coupled with their expressions, tone, and other aspects, Chu Mu could already make a judgment. Immediately after, he drew his sword. With a flash of sword light, a ray of sword Qi pierced through the air and shot towards the black-clothed person. "You!" The black-clothed person's sharp and gloomy eyes shone with terrifying fury and killing intent. It was hard to imagine that an ant at the sword Qi realm would actually dare to attack him. Unfortunately, he really was heavily injured, and he could not even use his innate sword Qi. He struggled to dodge the sword Qi, but it was difficult for him to do so. Immediately, the sword Qi struck his body, tearing through his skin and causing blood to flow. "Damned ant, stop immediately. Otherwise, the Bloodsword Tower will hunt you down endlessly, including everyone related to you. They will all die." This threat that seemed to come from the depths of hell made Chu Mu's heart turn cold. A cold intent circled around him, and he could not help but tighten his grip on his sword. "Little brother, don't worry. The Bloodsword Tower is currently facing a hunt. They can't even take care of themselves. As long as you kill him, nothing else will happen," the silver-clothed person said slowly. His voice seemed to contain a sliver of reassuring power. Regardless of whether it was the silver-clothed person's words or the black-clothed person's threat, Chu Mu had to act. Only by killing this black-clothed person would he be able to achieve the best result. As for the rest, it would depend on the situation. Chu Mu struck out again. This time, he used the killing move, Golden Edge Shattering Space. The condensed faint golden light disappeared into the void, and in the next second, it appeared at the black-clothed person's neck. The black-clothed person's eyes were filled with extreme fear, but with a soft sound, his neck was cut off by the faint golden light. The silver-clothed person was stunned at first, but then a hint of admiration flashed through his eyes. This young swordsman was so decisive and did not hesitate at all. Ordinary people could not compare to him. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation.